Kliff than I think most of us. Not everybody, but most of us. He is the first person to very politely get in front of a microphone and say Terry needs to be in practice. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Dente sitting in for Kevin here on the Team 980 on a Friday. Got Max in the house, got Brian in the house. No Terry in the house, at least not on the practice field. He is there in Ashburn, but he is not practicing. And look, it's been a month at this point of this back and forth with Terry this and Terry that and Adam Peters this and Adam Peters that. But what we had not had in any of that was somebody saying anything even remotely not positive. I'm not going to say negative, because I don't view these comments by Kliff Kingsbury that you'll hear in a second as negative. But they're also not like uberly positive. And up until this point, every single comment that had been made in regards to Terry, either from Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, Kliff Kingsbury before this, players when asked, everything had been positive about, you know what, business is business. We'll be ready for him when he's here. Or something along those lines. Paraphrasing, people talk differently, but it's been something along those lines. Until today, when Kliff Kingsbury decided he wanted to put a little bit of pressure, just a tiny, tiny bit of pressure on Terry to get himself to practice. Because now we are halfway through August. This is not early August. This is not midway through. We are halfway through the month of August, and you're getting to the point where in the blink of an eye, you'll be able to count the days to week one on your two hands without repeating fingers. And if Terry still isn't there by that point, then there's going to need to be a serious conversation about, will he actually play week one? How much will he play week one? And so on and so forth. So before I get too much deeper into this, I want you to hear these comments from Kliff. There's 4 of them that we're going to play, and then we will discuss these a little bit further. We will take your calls on this topic as well at 301-230-0980. So we'll just kind of go in order here, Max. Kliff spoke earlier today. They were scheduled initially at the beginning of the week to have a Thursday or Friday practice at 1 p.m. due to heat, weather, just liking to practice early in the morning. Whatever the reason is, they moved practice from 1 to, I believe it started either 8 or 9, but that meant that Kliff and Joe Witt spoke before practice. So Kliff Kingsbury was up and at 'em today talking about Terry McLaurin and the offense as a whole. Here's what Kliff said about Terry and the time on task or lack thereof.
And then with Terry, what kind of things can you do now even to help make sure that when he gets back out of the field, that there's not this long transition period to get that rhythm and connection back with Jaden?
Yeah, with him or just kind of overall?
With Terry in particular.
Yeah, I mean, there hasn't been a ton of contact with him. You know, he's been here, but he's been working with the trainers. So until he gets back on the grass, that's when we'll start building that back up.
At that point, what can you do at that point to make sure it doesn't take a long time?
Yeah, I think, you know, that's one of those deals. It's just time on task. And luckily what they had last year to build a lot of rapport and chemistry. And Terry understands our system going into a year or two. So that should expedite the process. But to me, it's time on task together on the grass is really the only way that you can continue to build.
All right, so there are some flags in here that we need to address in those specific comments first. I think an orange flag, Max, is that Kliff was kind of nudging and saying he needs to get on the practice field. He needs to get on the grass. We're going to label that as an orange flag. It's not a reason for alarm, but it's also not a green flag. You see orange and you're like, all right, there's something going on here that isn't absolutely spectacular. We are labeling as a red flag the fact that Kliff Kingsbury just said there has not been a lot of contact between himself and Terry, because through this entire process, I was under the impression, and likely you were under the impression, that while Terry wasn't practicing, he was still participating in every other way, shape, or form. attending meetings, talking to people, hanging out with teammates, so on and so forth. Anything that you could consider participating inside the building, I was under the impression that he was doing all of that. Just when it came time to practice, he would work with the trainers, handle whatever the day had in regards to the training. That could be running, stretching, mobility, whatever their plan was. And then eventually he would come out to practice, sign some autographs, go back in, do the meetings, do the film, all of those things. What Kliff Kingsbury just said is there has not been a lot of that. So that is the first red flag that we are going to hold up on the comments that Kliff Kingsbury made today about Terry McLaurin. He went further. So this is what Kliff said about the classroom work with Terry to this point in the offseason.
Hey, Kliff, going back to Terry real quick, you talk about, gelling with the offense on the grass. How much work are you getting with him in the classroom, and kind of at this point of the season, how high value is that? Is the meeting work?
Yeah, I think, not as much as we would if he was full go. There's no doubt. But I think, like I said, I'm huge on walkthroughs, on practice, things like that, because until you get on the grass and actually do it and feel the timing, feel the depths of routes and things of that nature, I don't know exactly how much you can get out of that. So I think we're kind of at that point to where we need to start getting those guys when they're available out there and gelling and seeing what we are as an offense.
So these are two red flags here. It doubles down what Kliff just said, doubles down on what I took away from the first comment, is that Terry is not as active as I was under the impression he was when it comes to classroom work, meetings, working with the offense, being in communication with at least Kliff. Maybe he's talking to wide receiver coaches. Maybe he's talking to other guys on the staff. But from what Kliff just said there has not been a ton of communication in terms of the classroom work. Now, I am not an expert by any stretch of the imagination on how to run a football team. But I would think that if you cannot get out there on the grass, you would maybe go extra hard on the non-grass related things in the classroom, in meetings, in film. I would think there would be an emphasis on doing all of those things, maybe to a greater degree, to make sure that when you eventually and inevitably do make your way back to the grass, you hit the ground running, pun fully intended there. From what Kliff said in the beginning portion of that statement, that is not happening the way that I was under the belief that it was happening. And then red flag number 2, that's 3 for anyone that is counting on just 2 clips. Red flag number 3 is that he is urging Terry to get back out there. And again, this is the first time that anybody has had any real sense of urgency when it comes to speaking about Terry publicly. Behind closed doors, I'm sure this has been said for days, weeks, potentially months. But for the first time publicly, someone is saying, we would really like it if he gets to practice, if he is out there so he can gel with this unit, if he is out there so me as a coach, I understand what I am working with. And you know what Terry is like. So there is a little bit of benefit of this is not a new offense. This is not a whole lot of new faces on the coaching staff. So you understand what Terry represents as a player from a skill set position. But I'm also not expecting, and you should not be expecting, the offense in 2025 to be exactly the same as the offense in 2024. There are going to be adjustments, especially with the addition of a guy like a Deebo Samuel, who you can now move around in a bunch of different ways, especially with the addition of a guy like Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt and how that impacts the rotation with the running backs and the addition of Laramie Tunsil. And there's so many different new pieces on this offense that there was bound to be some sort of adjustment and just natural evolution from year to year. You can't go from year to year having the exact same thing. Eventually, defenses are going to catch on, and eventually they'll find ways to stop it. So it's fair to think that they're going to be making some changes. And now, because we are halfway through the month of August, Terry has not been out on the field practicing any of those changes, any of those evolutions in the offense. And from what Kliff has just said in those last 2 sound bites, he's not getting as much classroom work as I think Kliff certainly wants him to have been having. I mean, he's not saying this if he's thrilled with what's going on right now. This is a little bit of an opening into what is going on behind closed doors. He continued here. Here's what he said about the offense continuing to gel throughout training camp.
Hi, Coach. Looking at this offense overall, have you seen them come together, starting to mash and gel?
Yeah, I think that's a work in progress. There's no doubt. I don't think until we get some of these other pieces back, we're going to know exactly what we are. We've had some good opportunities to see other guys get work in these positions, but when you don't have your kind of projected top two outside receivers, one of your projected or both your projected inside pieces at guard, it's not going to really give you the chance to gel or really build that relationship until you get everybody else on the grass. So that's something we have to get to over the next 3 weeks.
There is a little bit of frustration here, Max, that I don't know we have heard a ton from Kliff Kingsbury in the first year and change of him being here in DC.
And there's one little moment in it that I feel like you hear the frustration. It's where he like pauses when you don't have your, and then he thinks for a second. He's like, "Oh, I got to throw Noah Brown's name in here too." So
I got to add more than just Terry here. I can't keep taking shots at the number one wide receiver, because don't make any mistake about it. Terry is listening. Like he is listening. His agent is listening to these comments. We are at the point where this is really like crunch time to get a deal done. There is a different sense of urgency, I feel like, to get a deal done, because again, it's August 15th. You play a real legitimate football game in less than a month. None of this preseason nonsense against Cincinnati and a bad defense, against a joint practice that is no longer, against the Baltimore Ravens. You play a real legitimate game against a real divisional opponent who, by the way, happens to have a really good defense, or at least is projected to have a really good defense. I don't know that that offense is going to be spectacular, but I have no issue being honest and saying that defensive line for New York is frightening. They got a bunch of dudes out there. So I do like that he did include, we'll give Kliff a green flag for this. I do like that he also included the guards, with Brandon Coleman obviously being the big one there. Now, that's a red flag in itself, because Coleman now has missed a significant chunk of time as well with his own injury. So it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but how much are you really going to get better on offense in training camp if you do not have your full slate of offensive weapons that are out there on the field? And this is the time where you are supposed to be getting better. I have never been one, and I don't think I ever will be one, to freak out over a bad preseason highlight. I've been on the other side where I've had some positive freakouts. We all remember the summer of Doxson and Pryor. We all were there. We freaked out together. We're like, oh my God, look at this one-handed grab. Oh my God, he's mossing defenders. Like, we all were there. We've had some positive freakouts. I've never been one to have a negative freakout about something going on in training camp, because I understand this is when you are supposed to be getting all of the issues out of your system. You're kind of supposed to be bad in training camp so you can be good by the start of the regular season, to get everybody on the same page and to really hit the ground running in the regular season. If Terry is not out there, if Noah is not out there, if Brandon Coleman is not out there, what are your realistic expectations going to be? Because the unfortunate reality for how Washington and their schedule line up in 2025, it's a lot more difficult than 2024. There aren't a lot of rest periods that you could point to and say, well, at least you have 2 or 3 games that should be comfortable. There were a bunch of those last year. Not the case this year. So having your guys miss significant chunks of time, now having your offensive coordinator speak in a way that is not your super pro pom-pom cheerleader, get Terry out here, we're so excited for him when he's here. This is the first time where anyone's been like, we need to get all of our guys out here or our expectations are going to be shifted. One final thing from Kliff here. Again, this is all from this morning. This was about like 8:30 a.m., 8 a.m. whenever Kliff got to the microphone. So this is all from this morning. Here's what Kliff said about the wide receiver group as a whole so far throughout training camp.
And have you been able to see from the wide receiver room what you need to see from that group and how are they shaping up together?
Yeah, it's still a work in progress. Some guys are taking advantage of the opportunities and some have not. And that's what we wanted to see. Without, Terry and Noah getting much, we know what Debo is. And then there's a lot of guys that are trying to earn a roster spot. And so that competition has been good, but I think there's still a lot to show over the next 3 weeks.
3 This is not maybe great for the Ja'Cory Brooks hive, the Jalen Lane hive. We probably need better nicknames. The hive was great with Heineke and Howe because there was alliteration.
Exactly.
So I might need a little bit more time to think of what we call those fan bases who have been very, very loud. And to their credit, I'm excited about Jalen Lane. I'm very optimistic about Ja'Cory Brooks making the roster, but I have not stooped down to the level where I think Ja'Cory Brooks is going to replace the production that Terry has had by any stretch of the imagination.
Hey, man, I've heard reports out of training camp this morning that he's been making some great plays.
He made a tough catch today. Sick. I'm not of the belief that he is going to replace Terry. So those guys have had good summers, certainly. You think they're going to make the roster, certainly. But they need Terry. They need Noah Brown out there. So just in 4 comments there, we had what we will call definitively 3 red flags from Kliff. And he was the first person to nudge Terry McLaurin to say, hey, buddy, we would like you at practice. We need you at practice. If we want to achieve the goals that we have set for ourselves and that are being set by the outside world, myself, those of us on this station, those of us across the hall, the national media, everybody considering Washington a legitimate contender for a Super Bowl for the first time in well over a decade. Vegas in there as well. They think very, very highly of Washington in the NFC. If we're going to achieve all of these things, we need Terry McLaurin, and we need Terry McLaurin to practice. Your thoughts, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. What do you make of the comments that Kliff Kingsbury just made about Terry McLaurin and how that impacts your expectations for the season? We will take some of your phone calls. You can tweet me as well at the Denton Day. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 with Denton Day sitting in for Kevin. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin here on the Team 980. You can tweet me at the Denton Day. We'll have Ben Standing with us at noon from training camp. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt in pads today. I know there was a little bit of concern about him not being as full of a participant this week as we would have hoped. So that's a very positive sign. More with Ben in the 12 o'clock hour. But any and all training camp coverage on the Team 980 is brought to you nationally by Geico. You can switch and save, get more with Geico. Our current conversation is in regards to the comments that Kliff Kingsbury made about Terry McLaurin today. The first time that this entire offseason someone has urged Terry politely to come back to practice. And I would like to emphasize the polite nature of what Kliff was saying. He didn't sugarcoat it, but he was direct. He was fair. He didn't call Terry out of his name or anything like that. Trust me, we have seen that before. He was direct and says, we need to have all of our guys if we can have realistic expectations to be as good as everybody thinks we are going to be. You can join the conversation. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. What did you think of the comments that Kliff made about Terry McLaurin? Let's go to Rob in D.C. Rob, what's going on?
What's going on, then? Hey, first I want to introduce myself. And we spoke before prior, but so myself personally, I work with a local sports group. We represented Josh Pryor. He blocked that kick at the end of the Ron Rivera era.
Yeah.
Came from Bowie State, played on his roster. I want to go back and emphasize what I've called multiple times on multiple shows and said, Buddy Baker and I guess either him or Tony, they're doing a terrible job of negotiating Terry's contract. And I don't know if Terry's listening or the organization. My group will get this job done. We'll get this done because it'll be the best for Terry and the organization because they both need each other. So, and the thing about it is, and as working with sports players and working with a sports group in general, sometimes you gotta do what's best for the player and the team and put the group aside. You know, that's what we do.
Wait, hold on, Rob. Hold on. Before you go any further, do you know Buddy Baker?
I did not meet Buddy Baker, but I met someone from Terry's group when we were working through. And I'm gonna tell you that I'm not gonna speak bad on someone, especially my competitors, but I do not think they're doing what's best for Terry's career and the team, honestly, because just looking at the industry and looking at the actual components that are established right now, Terry McLaurin is best on the field. He's not. I'm not gonna say he's not the most marketable person, but you don't see him on commercials. You don't see him like Baker Mayfield and stuff like that. So he gets his notoriety from playing football. So you need him on the field.
Right.
Him not being on the field takes away the leverage that he has because he's a football player. You know, and that's one of the major points that I will make. And certain things as a sports group, you can do things to make sure your player is okay and cover outside of the team. So that's what we do. We take care of our players outside of what the organization does.
Right.
So,
Rob, I appreciate it. That's some good insight there. I also appreciate the self-plug that you had there. I'm okay with it, honestly, at this point. We're so deep
Anything
in these
to get this deal
conversations
done, bro.
where if someone else can do this for him, I'm not exactly going to sit here and shut down any sort of shameless plug there from Rob. We're going to get to some Buddy Baker stuff a little later in the show. That's a little bit of a long tease, probably after AWOD joins us at 11 a.m. because let me tell you, I got some things that I need to get off my chest when it comes to the agent repping Terry McLaurin, but we will do that in about an hour from now. We're continuing to take your calls at 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Did the comments that Kliff Kingsbury made today impact the way that you are viewing this Terry McLaurin situation? Richard is in Maryland. Richard, what's going on?
Hey, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing well.
Great. You know what? I interpret it a little different than how you're characterizing it.
Okay.
What I heard from Kliff, kind of struggling, really, to place any blame on Terry. As a matter of fact, prior to him actually saying the guard and naming the other receiver, he continued to use the term they. He was saying they need to be back. So I think these guys, you know, they operate in a culture where when it comes to contract, nobody's going to interfere with someone else's pocket, more or less. So I don't think he's actually saying that. I think he's just saying in general, whether it be Terry's responsibility, management responsibility, I need my pieces out here, because ultimately when this offense don't perform, everybody's going to point the finger at Kliff. So Kliff is probably a little frustrated with everybody involved in this, the management side of it, Terry's side of it, the guards who aren't out there, Brown who isn't out there, because like I said, ultimately people are going to say, hey, well, Kliff's offense didn't do as well this year, or Kliff offense is struggling this year. So I think that's Kliff's frustration more than anything else. I don't think it's just about Terry. I think the media, and people who feel like Terry should be out there because he's under contract and this and that. Well, everybody knows these contracts don't mean anything when the team is ready to cut you loose and you have an average annual salary amount of some enormous amount that they're never going to pay. That's the indication that, okay, we're cutting you loose this year, or we're going to restructure that. So when the player feels like, they have value that they're not being compensated for, even if they do have a year left on the contract, they're going to try to negotiate, and they're going to do things necessary so that they're properly compensated.
Yeah.
These guys, man, hey, they out there, they're playing with all kind of injuries. They're having their bodies operated on.
Right. Richard, I appreciate there's some good stuff there. We got other calls to get to. So here's what I will say. I don't think your stance is unfair. I do think there is some frustration with Kliff regarding those that are also doing the negotiating. I can't imagine that he is informed with those negotiations. And what I mean by that is I can't imagine that he knows exactly how the team is handling the negotiation versus how Terry is handling the negotiation. I think the biggest difference between coaches and those inside the organization and those of us that are sitting behind these microphones is that we both really don't know what's going on. The lone difference is that if Kliff really wanted to know what's going on, he has the resources to ask just to get an idea. But I don't get the sense that to be honest, I don't get the sense that he really cares about that. That's not really his job. It's not above his pay grade. He doesn't gain anything or lose anything by caring or not caring about how the negotiating is going outside of the fact that Terry is not here. So I don't know that he knows that one side is offering a fair deal and the other side is being overly obtuse, or vice versa. One side is offering an unfair deal and the other one is just upset about that. Whatever the speculation that we have, I don't know that Kliff buys into that, but I do think it's fair to say he's frustrated with both sides, because you are now into the middle, the halfway point of August, and your second best player on offense has only been on the field to sign autographs and to watch a scrimmage. And that's about it. Like, they haven't even gotten to the point yet where he's doing side drills outside, which is a general, when you talk about the ramp up process, you do your stuff with the trainers, and then inevitably or eventually you come outside and you will do some positional drills, and then you'll sit to the side and watch some other stuff going on here, right? Whether that be 7-on-7s, 11-on-11s, pads, whatever. But that's a general ramp-up process. We're not even at that point yet. So even when Terry does sign the contract and magically, thanks to the poof of millions and millions of dollars, the ankle is good enough to then be out there, you then have to spend a couple of days ramping up to get ready for actual 7-on-7s, 11-on-11s. And then in turn, it's going to take probably at least 4 or 5 days once this thing finally gets settled before we even really see Terry operating in any way, shape, or form on the field that is more than just maybe catching passes while he runs like in routes for 15 minutes before practice or something along those lines. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Earlier this morning, Kliff Kingsbury urged Terry McLaurin to get back into practice, politely, but saying, hey, we need our guys out here if we are expected to be good this year. Let's go to Joe in Springfield. Joe, what do you think about Kliff's comments?
Hey, Denton, how you doing? Good to hear from you.
Appreciate it, Joe. Hope you're well.
Yeah, same to you. You know something? Good for Kliff Kingsbury to speak up and say something, because he is preparing for his second season here, and considering what we have just come off our best season in over 30 years, he wants to see what he's got in his offense because he's going to be the one calling plays again, and he needs to see how Terry and Debo can match up well, play well together, along with Jaden. I mean, they already did well. Jaden and Terry did well last year, and Jaden and Debo is trying to do a good connection this time. But Terry and Debo, they got to get a good connection going too. So the fact that Kliff is speaking up and saying, okay, this is enough. I need to figure out what I'm doing to prepare because, by the way, 4 weeks from Sunday, we're hosting the Giants in the home opener, and that defense is hungry. And that the Giants always seem to give us problems every year, even if they stink. So we're playing the Giants 4 weeks from Sunday. I, for one, Terry, Buddy Baker, whatever the heck you're doing, buddy, you got to figure this out and get Terry signed because I trust the front office. They're doing what they do best. Because remember, the previous ownership, I keep trying to tell all these people like Ian or Mark, whoever calls in, they're for some reason then they're still stuck with Snyder in their mind saying, oh, that this would have been done wrong a long time ago. Well, this is a different regime, and they don't do that. So I trust the front office. Terry, get the deal done. Buddy Baker, stop doing this. And Kliff, thank you for speaking up because I want to play. I'm tired of this.
Joe, I appreciate it. It does feel like, I'm going to get nerdy here. It does feel like we're stuck in like this time loop. Because in a perfect world, I would have much rather had this done in like July. But because of the way that the negotiating has gone and some of the things that we heard yesterday, which we will play for you coming up here in about 10 minutes, again today about how the beginning of the negotiating process worked, a deal was never going to get done all the way back in June or July, which does make me scratch my head a little bit more about some of the comments that Terry made at Eastern Motors, which has then led us to here and being valued, and I want to be valued financially and all of these different things. Not knowing some of the dollar figures that have been alluded to, we have ideas of like DK money, but not knowing some of the dollar figures that have been alluded to, I don't even know that honestly the Snyder regime would have gotten this done early. Like they only got that first Terry contract done because Dan was getting skewered by smart people, aka us. Because of all of the litigation and ESPN deep dive, Big J journalism reports, and anyone who was doing any sort of investigation on him, which was plentiful at that point in time, he was like, I need a win in the headlines. I will just pay him whatever. Well, that's not how most organizations work. There are some that still do that. Don't get it twisted. There are some that still do that, but that is not how this organization works anymore. So I don't even know if the number that was being alluded to that they suggested at the beginning of negotiations was legitimate, which is potentially around like $35 million. I don't even think Dan Snyder, whose head was so far up his ass, it wasn't even funny at that point anymore. I don't think he would have done anything with that contract either. Even he, an idiot, would have said this is probably a little too high. Matt is in Virginia. Matt, you're on the Kevin Sheehan show with Denton Day sitting in.
Hey there. Yeah, I think Dan Snyder he signed Terry to a $23 million extension, right? So I don't think you can really say that he wouldn't have signed him to 35. I mean, it's a different area now.
Well, he signed him to that $23 million extension back in 2022.
Here's what I'm calling. Back, I had this feeling when Kirk Cousins was sort of on his way out of the team with the Terry situation. And number two, I try to look at this from a corporation point of view. When he got up there at Eastern Motors and had his little press conference, he crossed his bosses. And at that point, it becomes time to, I mean, this has dragged on long enough. He wants to trade, move him, trade him,
So here's the thing, Matt, I appreciate it. I don't actually think he wants to trade. I do not. This is where we get back to the agent and the entire S show that this process has been. Requesting a trade when they requested a trade pretty much guaranteed that a trade was very unlikely to happen. I don't think they were going to trade Terry McLaurin anyway. Like they could have asked for a trade in April, and I still don't think that there would have been any sort of real motion. But if you really wanted a trade, April is the time to do it. Because you can then justify it as a team, the team doing the trading. Hey, we can move him now. His value is pretty high because the draft is right around the corner. We can move him, and then we can work to find a replacement for him in the NFL draft. If you're Adam Peters right now, any draft pick is nice, but it doesn't really help you for 2025 because that draft pick is not going to be used until at the very earliest 2026 or potentially 27, depending on what kind of draft pick you get for him. That doesn't help him now. So Terry's value in terms of draft pick return for Washington is low because the draft is so far away. It also is low because the team who's trading for him is going to realize they need to sign him to whatever kind of crazy money, DK money, whatever, that he is asking for. So the value in return for Washington is going to be low if you trade him now. They requested a trade just to kind of like stick it to the man and be like, hey, we mean business. Take us seriously. All of these things. I don't think it worked, by the way. I have not started taking that any more seriously. Max, I can't imagine that you have been taking this any more serious. When he requested a trade, it was just like, well, we got to talk about this for another 4 or 5 days. Like that's really all it was at that point.
Yeah, it was kind of like, oh, here's the next step in this process.
And then they mean business. We already knew that. So I don't think he actually wants to leave. I think that's just a point of the business. And that's why that no one is freaked out about that on the coaches, whatever. Like Kliff just wants him at practice. No one is freaking out about the trade request because everybody understands you're not getting traded. Washington also has a ton of control in this scenario. You're under contract now. They can franchise tag you next year. And if they really want to get crazy, they can franchise tag you the year after that. And then if they franchise tag you 2 years in a row, potentially it still might be lesser value long-term for the Commanders versus what you are asking for now. If we're going to believe what Charles Robinson said, which was the ask at the beginning was so insane that it almost completely stopped negotiations from the jump. We'll continue taking some of your phone calls at 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Did the comments that Kliff Kingsbury made this morning impact the way that you are viewing this Terry McLaurin situation? 301-230-0980. You can tweet me as well at the Denton Day. More of your phone calls when we get back on the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day sitting in.
All right. Happy Friday, everybody. Here's what's happening. Undrafted free agent and former Texas wide receiver Isaiah Bond and second-round pick from Ohio State Quinshon Judkins are both signing with the Browns. After having their respective charges dropped in court, Isaiah Bond was no billed on sexual assault, meaning the state is not pursuing charges, and Quinshon Judkins' battery charges stemming from a domestic incident were dropped. We also say so long to former Washington Redskin and Jacksonville Jaguar guard Brandon Scherff, who quietly retired this offseason. Scherff, drafted by Washington in the first round of the 2015 NFL Draft, was a bright spot in an otherwise forgettable era of Washington football. He now calls it a career. To baseball, the Nats, they DFA first baseman Nathaniel Lowe the day after hitting a grand slam versus Kansas City to make room for the return of outfielder Dylan Cruz. Last night, the Nats, they beat the Phillies by a score of 3-2. Brad Lord with a solid outing, only giving up 2 earned runs. Rookie reliever Shinosuke Agasawara picks up his first career win after striking out Kyle Schwarber, and Cole Henry earns the save. Looking to carry that momentum into tonight as they continue their weekend series versus the Phillies. Mackenzie Gore is taking on Zach Wheeler tonight at Nats Park. First pitch at 6:45. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 6:15. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980 and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1, and you can catch Denton's office throughout the football season and then some. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin here on the Team 980 at the Denton Day on Twitter. Adam Epstein joins us in 15 minutes. Ben Standig at 12. Our conversation right now, Kliff Kingsbury made comments about wanting to see Terry McLaurin in practice. He was the first person this offseason to very politely but strictly and sternly nudge Terry and say, we would really like you in practice. How does that impact the way you view this scenario? 301-230-0980. You can also tweet me. Our guy Matt says, I think he signs by Sunday. I base this purely off of blind optimism. I'm done with the blind optimism thing personally because I have listed out like July 4th, the start of training camp, the
August
New
8th.
England game. I was going to get on here and say the Baltimore game. So, like, I'm kind of done with the blind optimism, but I appreciate that that's still pumping with you right now, Matt. At Be Nice Forever says Kliff was professional, respectful, classy, true, honest, and team first. I think all of those are accurate. My guy Kelly says, loved it. Direct grown man stuff. Love the call out of the wide receiver room, including number 17. Time on task, feet on the grass. Kliff Kingsbury in regular season mode. Feet on the grass is something we might have to use more frequently as like a phrase. That is a pretty good one.
It is.
Like feet on the grass. I'm going to use that one a little bit more. I don't know how yet.
We'll find a way.
I don't know how
season.
I could do that in like regular day life, but I will find a way to do that in regular day life. 301-230-0980. Jerome is in DC. Jerome, what's going on?
Hey, Ben, thanks for taking my call. I don't weigh either way. I feel the same way. I just think that Terry, I believe that in that interview he had with Ethan Motors, I just think that he messed up right there. I just think that he brought us into the negotiation room by telling us a little bit about they not communicating with me. And I don't know if he got bad advice from his agent, but I think right then I just think that Peterson and them felt that, listen, this is a new regime. We keep things secret. We talk, we do this and do that. And I just think they panicked. And I think from there it's all downhill. Now he requested for a trade and things like that. I just think right now Terry just need to fire the agent. They could do that. Fire him and get somebody else and get him in here and let's keep this thing going, Terry. I mean, we had a great season. And I just think that he's stay over their head by trying to build off that season we had and just trying to get it all at one time. So I just think that Terry just need to sign, and let's get this thing going. And on another note, I'm from D.C. They are tearing that RFK down, and I am so happy. I've been depressed looking at that thing for 30 years. And I mean, every time I rode past there, and just to see them bulldozing that thing down.
It looks great, doesn't it?
So I am good.
Yeah, it's the best that destruction has ever looked, Jerome. I'm with you. I haven't driven past it since they've started tearing it down yet, Max, but I've seen the pictures and the videos, and it is fantastic. So I want to get to a point that Jerome made on the call. And Max, this is crazy. Did you know that today is the month anniversary of that Eastern Motor shoot? It feels like it's been a lifetime. But that happened exactly a month ago, almost to the hour. I think he started talking at like 2 p.m. that day or something like that.
No, we carried it. I remember because it was like right at 12:30. I think
it was 12:30.
It was 12:45 because it was 30 minutes and bled into Chris Russell show, but we carried the whole thing because journalism. And
Big J journalism right here.
Yeah. So that's I remember Kevin and I were sitting here about 30 minutes into it and we were both going, this is getting pretty long.
Very, very long. So that was a month ago. Here's just a general timeline of everything that has happened since then. And Mason Kinahan put this on Twitter. So I'm using this graphic that he threw up. July 15th was Terry speaking at Eastern Motors, the disappointed and frustrated. That is also when we found out that they had not communicated in a month. That is also when we found out that he wants to be valued financially. That's a direct way that he phrased that. I want my value to be represented by financial, whatever he said, financial, not free. He didn't say financial freedom, but be shown in a way that is financial. On July 22nd, that's a week after that, Terry doesn't report to training camp. He officially becomes a hold out. He becomes a hold in 5 days later. On July 27th, he's placed on the PUP list with an ankle injury. Not much has been said exactly about what the ankle injury is. We don't know if it's a sprain. We don't know if it's tendonitis. We don't know if it's just because he's not getting paid. I think most of us feel it's the latter, but nothing has really been said other than ankle injury for Terry. On July 31st, which is 4 days after he became a hold-in, he officially requested a trade. On August 5th, he didn't travel with the team to New England. That's pretty, I think, normal when you're on the PUP list. You're just not everyone's going to travel for that. So I don't put too much on that. August 12th, he was seen watching practice and talking with Adam Peters. Now, there's a couple other things sprinkled in there, like him signing for fans almost every single day that fans were out there. There's a couple of things in there about like him, hugging Josh Harris and Jaden Daniels' mother. I bring up Jaden Daniels' mother for no reason other than the fact that she is a licensed NFLPA agent. I just would like to pop that in there. I don't think she wants to represent Terry. I'm just saying.
But like, she could.
She is a licensed NFLPA agent. She got that certification. I believe it was earlier this offseason. It might have been at the end of last year. I'm just putting that out there into the ether for somebody to listen. But it's been a lot for Terry. It's been a whole lot. And the Eastern Motors thing was, I liked the way that Jerome put it, is that he brought us into the negotiation because we didn't know anything. We knew that he did not go to minicamp. We knew that he was there and then left, but we didn't know much else until he said, we haven't spoken in a month, because Washington now does not leak this information. We did not know that there was a massive discrepancy in the pay because Washington does not leak this. We didn't know any of this until Terry said that. And as you have mentioned today, Max, as I have mentioned previously, I know Kevin has mentioned previously on this show, that thing was entirely too long. It was 30 minutes, which just allows, when you're talking for 30 minutes, one, it's incredibly difficult. There's a reason why no one does that in radio. Well, Kevin does occasionally.
I was going to say, Kevin does it way more often than most.
He does it way more often than most, and probably a little bit more than he should. But there's like a reason why nobody talks 30 minutes uninterrupted on a regular basis, because eventually you either get yourself into a word salad or you allow things to leak through the cracks that do not need to be shared publicly. And I think we got that with Terry at Eastern Motors. I can understand what he was attempting to do of like, I'm this friendly guy, I'm this commander, I want to showcase the personality element of this, the human element of this. And I know that the fans back me. And in all of those, he was true. Like, there's a human element to this negotiation that we don't cover as much. The fans are definitely on his side. Don't believe everything that you read in comment sections and on Twitter. When he is out there at training camp, the fans are very much in favor of Terry. Pay Terry chants have been almost every time fans have been out there. Like, the fan base is certainly as a whole on his side, but it didn't help, I don't think, the way that they thought it was going to help. And we are still, a month later, nothing has been resolved. Maybe there's been progress. We don't really know, but nothing has been resolved. A couple more phone calls before we get to Adam Epstein, AWOD at 11 a.m. Phil is in Bowie. Phil, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on, gentlemen? I'm still perplexed that people upset he had that interview at Eastern Motors. I'm worried why they wasn't talking for a month. That's 30 days wasted on negotiations. They should have had this wrapped up, I prefer, sometime during the season, last season, before the market got set to where it is now. And I think they're wasting their time. And I don't know negotiations for the other players, Larry Tussle and the cornerback Lattimore. Hopefully they get them wrapped up soon and not have this same issue next off season.
So here's the thing, Phil, and here's the answer to that we got yesterday. Charles Robinson of Yahoo was on, I think it's like a new football show that Yahoo is doing in the mornings.
Inside coverage with Andrew Siciliano and and
Andrew Siciliano is formerly of NFL Network. Do we have that sound?
Of course.
All right. So here's what Charles Robinson said that I think does put that month-long absence of speaking into a completely different perspective.
So do you want to hear the full 3 minutes of it, or because I also have the different cuts that Darius put in for me?
You give me just what Charles Robinson said about the insane contract.
The incredible ask.
The incredible ask.
Here we go.
I think what happened, the way I understand it is, when negotiations first opened, I think the Commanders were a little stunned by initially what Terry McLaurin and his camp really gunning for in those negotiations.
That's why they didn't speak for a month. Because according to Charles Robinson, the camp of Terry, largely spearheaded by Buddy Baker, effectively came in there and started asking for crazy, crazy money. Now, we do not know what the crazy, crazy money is in this instance. He just said the ask was so big that Washington almost completely stopped negotiations in their tracks. Now, you don't have to be an idiot to know that the highest paid player in the NFL is Jamar Chase at around $40 million per year. There is then a very large gap between Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson getting $35 million per year, and then it's CeeDee Lamb at $34 million per year. So those right now are currently the top three in terms of most paid AAV at the wide receiver position in the NFL. The way that I've interpreted this is that if multiple people have said that Terry was asking for DK money recently, that initially that first ask was a number that was larger than CeeDee Lamb, and then that was a number potentially larger than Justin Jefferson. If they asked for a number that was larger than Jamar Chase, I would have stopped those conversations immediately too. Hell, if they're asking for a number that's larger than CeeDee Lamb, I'm stopping those conversations, because you need to provide something, some sort of analytic that has a little bit of consistency behind it to showcase why you feel like you are deserving of that number. It's been very, very clear that they are not paying for all of the good times that Terry provided during like the Ron eras and the Jay Gruden eras. And to be completely honest, they really shouldn't. The fact that this is even a conversation of they should royally overpay Terry because of what he did prior to this current regime. If you want to give him an extra like $1 million for being a commander, I'm okay with that. I think it might send a little bit of an iffy precedent, but I'm okay with that. But you shouldn't be putting in an extra $2 or $3 million per year. You know, the last time that happened in this particular market, now there are some differences. This is not completely apples to apples here, but that's what happened with Gilbert Arenas when he signed that massive 6-year contract. And until the Albert Hainsworth deal was signed, that was the worst contract I think that had been signed in DC history. He's coming off an injury, but the Wizards front office and the ownership group said, we love him, we appreciate what he's done, and we're going to pay him a substantial amount of money over the course of 6 years in a way that had not really been done a ton to that point in the NBA. So we've seen this here in town about paying for what you have done versus what you could do, kind of get you stuck in a tricky situation. So if they're coming in asking for 35, 36, or God forbid, $40 million, I'm stopping any conversation for a month too. You're in timeout. Right? Pause it. Like, we are not talking anymore. You're in timeout. Think about what you just did. And then once you're ready to be an adult about these conversations, you can get back to us. Adam Epstein, AWadd Radio. He joins us next. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Dente sitting in for Kevin on the Team 980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin here on the Team 980. It has already been an interesting morning. Kliff Kingsbury became the first player, coach, executive, anyone associated with the Washington Commanders that publicly kind of urged Terry McLaurin to get back to practice or wanting to see him on the field, on the grass, as Kliff Kingsbury said. With a little bit more on this, we'll go out to our phone lines. My guy, AWAD, Adam Epstein, good enough to jump on with us here on the Kevin Sheehan Show. Adam, we'll start right there. Kliff Kingsbury says we would really like it if Terry is back. He said with him not being on the field, it's hard to gel. What was your takeaways from the comments that Kliff made this morning?
Yeah, that was my takeaway. That's a guy that was on a trajectory to being another head coach again in the National Football League at the end of this season. And if Terry McLaurin doesn't play, it's very unlikely he becomes a head coach because it's kind of unlikely this team is a 13-win football team without Terry McLaurin. So that's a guy that understands that his future could be in jeopardy in terms of the dreams that he wants to reach without Terry McLaurin. And I think I've been saying this, a lot of people have been saying this. Terry is getting bad advice. He needs to play on this current deal.
Do you think he plays on this current deal, or do you believe that an extension is still going to get done before week 1?
I mean, it's just hard to believe an extension gets done. I mean, Dan, let me ask you something, because I had a listener ask me this yesterday. Why hasn't Deebo Samuel hold out, right? At the peak of his career, he's actually done more than Terry McLaurin, as much as I love Terry McLaurin, all right, he's loyal to this team. But Deebo has had a higher peak. Deebo could sit out. Deebo could hold out and say, no, well, if you want me to put my body on the line, I need a contract extension, right? So, what's the difference between him and Terry? I don't really have an answer for that. That was what my caller asked me, and I said, well, the fact that Terry's been on this roster and been on with this organization for a long time, he feels like he deserves to be paid. But just in terms of the contracts, yeah, he should just pay and then ask to get paid at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, so Deebo's contract is fully guaranteed, which I think is a slight difference. But I understand the point that your caller was making and that you were making there. Do you think that because of what Kliff said this morning, we are closer to Terry eventually getting back onto the field and playing on this current deal?
I hope so. I mean, when I was there at the joint practice on Tuesday and Terry was there, I really did think, all right, day off Wednesday, they'll get a deal done. And then, yesterday they were in the bubble and there was not a deal done. And now today there's not a deal done. This team's got to make a decision on Tuesday after the Bengals game. Michael Phillips thinks they can wait another week until after the Ravens preseason game. But I really do think that after this Bengals game, on that Tuesday, you got to make a decision. And if Terry McLaurin's not going to come and play, you might have to sign another free agent or bring in other guys to help out here. We don't have enough talent at the wide receiver room right now.
Hey, Odell Beckham Jr. is around. He retired and then said he didn't retire. Not that I think Odell Beckham Jr. in 2025 is any sort of real needle mover, but there are other guys out there. All right, so how about guys that are actually also out there legitimately? You've been able to go to practice over the past couple of weeks. When you're out there standing and watching, who are some of the guys that are jumping out to you when the pads are on?
Trey Amos, Frankie Louvu, Dorrance Armstrong, Javon Kinlaw, Johnny Newton, Will Harris, Mikey Sainer. Still a lot of defensive guys have really stood out. And then I really think that Jeremy McNichols has to make this roster in terms of everyone loves Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and Chris Rodriguez was a good contributor last year, but McNichols is the proven guy, and I think he proved that in preseason and has continued to do that throughout training camp. So those are the guys that have popped for me. It's just, I want to hear more about Luke McCaffrey, Ben Sennett, Jalen Lane. I just haven't. And when I was there, it was tough. I mean, Sam Hartman's squad won 14-0. That was the final score.
Yeah, not a lot of good has been said about the offense outside of the fact that Jane Daniels is Jane Daniels, which that is not going to change. And then that, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is someone that people are falling in love with. But I also recognize that people are falling in love with him purely because people are kind of done with Brian Robinson. So there's an extra element to that. Have you been able to watch a guy like a Laramie Tunsil at all when he is actually participating in some of the contact drills?
I have not. I have not seen Tunsil.
It's unfortunate, isn't it? Because I haven't seen him a ton either in the days that I've been out there, and you and I have been out there combined almost every single day. But he's a massive human being, and I want to see him, and we haven't. I'm excited about what he's going to bring, but it is tough to get a feel if we're not going to see him, and I'm not anticipating that he's going to play against Cincinnati.
Right. That's why I don't want Jaden to play against Cincinnati, because I don't think Tunsil will play. I haven't heard an update on Coleman. If you've heard an injury update on Brandon Coleman, I'd love to hear that, because I'm a little worried about where this offensive line is going to be at when we get to week 1, because it's a little bit banged up right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have not either, which is a little alarming. Do you think any starters are going to play? Do you want to see any starters play on Monday night?
I want to see a few guys, yeah. I have more of a list of who I don't want to see. I don't want to see Deebo Samuel, Jaden Daniels, Laramie Tunsil, Frankie Louvu, Bobby Wagner, Mikey Sainristil. Still, those guys, put them in bubble wrap, save them for the regular season. Everybody else has something to prove. I feel like is going to be competing with a backup there. So there's quite a few starters I'd like to see. Those are just the guys that, if Dan Quinn wants to play them, fine. I personally don't need to see them. I know everybody's saying, I just would love to see Jaden go out there and go 6 for 6 and lead the team down the field for a touchdown drive. Yeah, but if he goes out there and he struggles and they go 3 and out, and then it's just going to be a circus, or he could get hurt. There's just so many negative scenarios. To me, him leading us down the field for a touchdown against a bad Bengals defense doesn't really there's not enough juice in that squeeze for me to risk it. I'm not doing it. Laramie Tunsil, I don't want to see him until the regular season against the Giants. I believe in these guys, a few, especially the ones that are proven commodities. I don't need to see them until the regular season.
What about guys that you kind of alluded to with Jalen Lane, Luke McCaffrey? It felt like we didn't see them a ton in that matchup against New England, or at least they weren't throwing the ball a ton. How much do you want to see those guys that are going to make the roster but are kind of in a position where they're fighting for time?
Yeah, I'm really hoping that those guys are out there with Josh Johnson. I'm just kind of worried that Hartman's inaccurate, and it's hard to really evaluate some of these wide receivers when he's out there. So I'm hoping it'll be Josh Johnson. That's my personal opinion. Dan Quinn might go with Hartman again because they want him, I think, to win that job because he's younger. But yeah, I mean, Luke McCaffrey, they said he was ill, so that's why we didn't see him as much in the Patriots. Jalen Lane, maybe they were hiding him. Maybe they were, prepping for him to be a special team star. I want to see more of those guys against Cincinnati. So yeah, those are the guys. I mean, John Bates, Ben Sennett, Colson Yankoff, Cager, offensive linemen, except for Tunsil. I want to see all those guys against the Bengals, and for at least a half. I want anybody that is supposed to make this 53-man roster that's not maybe like a top 5 guy like Jaden, Deebo, and Tunsil. I want to see all those guys play. It's just the top of the top guys on the roster I don't need to see play. Everybody else that's competing, I want to see for basically the whole half against Cincy.
Yeah, very selfishly, I want to see what that defensive tackle rotation is going to look like, because Javon Kinlaw, dude, is massive. I mean, he is literally like a god amongst men out there on the football field.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I do think that the defensive line is a lot bigger than it was last year, and hopefully they're able to stop the run because of that. I was talking with my buddy about who we think are going to be the leading sack getters for the Commanders this year, and we kind of pointed to like Von Miller, Frankie Louvu. Is there somebody else that's going to jump out and get a lot of sacks? Maybe a Dorrance Armstrong, or maybe a Daron Payne. He's done that before.
Yeah, he certainly has, and I guess it is technically like a contract year. It could be a contract year for him, so maybe just put that up in his locker, and everything will be taken care of there. So before we promo this weekend, because we definitely want to do that, Adam Epstein with us here at AWadd Radio. He's the host of AWadd Radio on 910 The Fan in Richmond. Got a big event coming up on Saturday. Your feeling right now with everything that's going on, is this going to be a 12-win team sitting here now on August 15th?
I would say 10, 11 win team. My expectations have dropped slightly. I think Jaden Daniels is going to have to be Superman, and he's going to have to stay healthy. Good thing is he was Superman last year as a rookie.
Right.
And that was the big thing. I talked to Brandon Coleman, I talked to Ben Sennett, I talked to Kane Madrano, Jalen Lane. I try to asked all of them the same question. Is there one thing you could point to that Jaden has improved on? And it was a similar answer from all of them. Oh, it's so hard to give you one because he's working on another thing. But they all kind of said his understanding of the offense and pointing out things on the defense now. He's got a better grasp of that. And that's exactly what you want to hear from your starting quarterback. And so I do think that Jaden can lead this team once again to the postseason. That can absolutely happen. There are a lot of things that could slow this team down if they can't run the ball. If they struggle to win at home anytime, because we got some primetime games at home against very tough competition. We're gonna need like a 6-2 home record for sure this season if we're gonna be a playoff team again. So the tough schedule, this Terry situation, a couple of the things about the offensive line that's a question mark. I feel really solid about the defense. I think the defense will be top 15, and I think Jaden will lead this offense. The offense will go as far as Jaden goes, but if there's other pieces that can really step in, we could take it maybe a step farther. Like if Austin Eckler stays healthy and is 600 total, all-purpose yards, and Brian Robinson's 800 to 900, and Devo is 7 or 8 touchdowns. There are things that could take this offense a step forward, but I'm pretty confident that Jaden himself, if he's healthy, will get them to 10 wins.
All right, tell us about this weekend. Tell us about football weekend.
Yeah, we will be kicking off the football season tomorrow night at River City Roll and Scott's Edition from 6 to 10 p.m. Join us for a full season kickoff show with JP Flame from the Sports Junkies. We've got the original junk himself, Fred Smoot, Tim Hightower, Virginia Tech legend Ken Oxendine. We'll have representatives from all the local universities in the state, ODU, JMU, Virginia Tech, UVA, and others. A high school preview of 804 football here. Awesome live music from Mackenzie Ryan, Gone Country, which is Richmond's favorite country music band. DJ Dukes is back to spin the ones and twos, and we've got T-shirts, sunglasses, swag, giveaways, prizes, all going down tomorrow night at River City Roll, 6 o'clock.
And some of that swag is from these very Washington Commanders that you and I both love, correct?
Yeah. I think it's so cool that the Commanders are hooking us up with a bunch of swag. I think they understand that they had a good thing going when they came to Richmond, and the fan base loved it here in Richmond, but also people from Nova and the DMV would drive down to Richmond and come to training camp, and that ended in 2019 with Rivera not wanting to come because the Omni Hotel was too far away. And so since then, they only came for 2 days, I think, then 1 day, and then one event. And so it is cool that they're coming back to Richmond with a couple of guests and a bunch of swag. I mean, they're going to have you covered to celebrate the Burgundy and Gold this season at Football Festival.
Well, it should be fun, AWOD. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys have a great time out there. Anyone in Richmond, go out there, hang out with AWOD, preview the season. Appreciate it as always, my friend. Hope tomorrow goes well.
Absolutely. And I should mention our buddy Ryan Clary, the Stallion, will be performing the race heard around the world against my producer, Stubb. So Stubb versus the Stallion, a race at River City Roll, part of the event.
Wait, how long of a race are we talking here?
Well, it's old school. So the way we planned it was like, what did you guys do when you were talking smack about who's the fastest person in your neighborhood? We would race around somebody's house. And so that was what we did as a kid. So we're going to race around the River City Roll building here in Scott's Edition, back into the entrance, down the railing or down the hallway, and whoever can touch the stage first is your winner.
So it's head versus or head v head, right? 1v1.
Yeah, the producer Olympics, basically.
All right, well, that might be something that I need to check on. I'll have to talk to Clary about that in a couple hours. AWOD, appreciate it as always.
Thanks, man.
That is Adam Epstein, AWOD Radio on 910 The Fan in Richmond. You can hear him on the 106.7 The Fan as well on Saturdays here in DC. So I asked that Max the head versus head thing, because as soon as he said running around the house, which I did that when I was younger too, but it kind of gave me like the vibe of when Dwight wanted to show that he was faster than Toby, and he ran around the building and Pam brought a thermometer, not even a stopwatch, and just had him running and running. I just wanted to make sure that my boy Ryan Clary was not going to be stuck in like a Dwight Schrute situation where he's just running, gassing himself out for them to not actually take it seriously. So,
I don't know. I wouldn't take it out of the question. It feels like that Drewski video where he's dressed up in the Patriots uniform running down the hallway.
It feels a little like that. It feels
like it's going to be like that.
I just want to make sure my boy Clary is taken care of. I don't want to see him get done wrong by any stretch. He's going into enemy territory.
He's got to stretch, man. He's got to keep himself limber.
Got to warm up. get the bands, maybe get the massage gun, something going on there. All right. We'll get back into this Terry stuff. There is some stuff I want to play in regards to Adam Peters, the negotiator, that I found to be very, very interesting yesterday. But we'll continue to take some of your calls on Terry. Did the comments that Kliff Kingsbury made this morning, does that influence the way that you are viewing the Terry McLaurin situation? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Dente sitting in for Kevin on the Team 980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin here on a Friday at the Denton Day on Twitter. Ben Standing is going to join us at noon from training camp. Football Talk on the Team 980 is presented by Paramount Plus. You can't count on much these days, but you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. Watch your local NFL game live every Sunday on CBS and Paramount Plus all season long. Visit ParamountPlus.com/NFL to get started today. Joe Witt Jr. spoke today, but he is not the one that is dominating the headlines. That was Kliff Kingsbury. He spoke before practice, which today was very, very early. It's very rare that we have coordinators speaking at like 7:30, 8 a.m. Normally they speak at like 2 p.m. But Max was put to work early today. So Kliff Kingsbury had Max working. He became the first person this morning to talk about Terry McLaurin in a way that was not overly glowing and positive. It wasn't negative, but it was real. It was direct. It was to the point. The pom-poms are kind of gone. It's time to get to work with the football. We're in the month of August and deep into the month of August. We got a game coming up in less than a month, a game that actually matters. I was hoping that this Terry thing would be over and done with, and it's very clear that Kliff was hoping for the same, but there were a couple things that he said that were a little bit alarming. I just want to get back to them as we reset here. I want to hear what Kliff said about Terry and the time on task, because this was the thing that really struck me this morning.
Yeah, with him or just kind of overall? Like,
with Terry in particular.
Yeah, I mean, there hasn't been a ton of contact with him. You know, he's been here, but he's been working with the trainers. So until he gets back on the grass, that's when we'll start building that back up.
At that point, what can you do at that point to make sure it doesn't take a long time?
Yeah, I think, you know, that's one of those deals. It's just time on task. And luckily what they had last year to build a lot of rapport and chemistry. And Terry understands our system going into a year or two. So that should expedite the process. But to me, it's time on task together on the grass is really the only way that you can continue to build.
All right, so this is going to be our final chance to talk about Terry specifically today before we move on to other stuff. So you just heard what Kliff Kingsbury said, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. I am a little bit alarmed because for the entirety of this process, I was under the belief that while Terry was not on the field participating in practice, 11-on-11s, 7-on-7s, what have you, that he was in the classroom, that he was getting it done in the meetings, that there would be an overemphasis on the inside the building things because he's not out there on the field. And from the way that Kliff Kingsbury just described that, that is not the case. That is now moving the panic meter a little bit, Max, for me. Not necessarily the panic meter on whether a deal gets done or not, but the panic meter in terms of what is this going to look like when this situation is in the rearview mirror, whether that be with a long-term extension, which is still the hope that I have, or whether that be Terry McLaurin playing out this contract and just seeing what is going to happen in 2026. When this is in the rearview mirror, what is this actually going to look like on the field if he's not overemphasizing the meeting stuff? Because now you're at the point in the offseason where you are adding things to the repertoire offensively. You're not just taking everything that you did in 2024, bringing it all into 2025 and just saying, we're just going to be better at this stuff. We're going to do all the same stuff, but we're just going to be better. We're going to execute at a better level, and life is going to be great. No, you got to evolve offensively. You got to add new things. That comes with the new pieces in Deebo Samuel, Laramie Tunsil, moving Brandon Coleman. Like, there's a lot of differences from this year to last year with Terry not being out there and apparently, according to Kliff Kingsbury, not getting a lot of quality time with Kliff Kingsbury. I am now a little bit alarmed as to what it's going to look like when Terry does inevitably play in 2025. What about you? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Jason is in Laurel. Jason, what's going on?
Hey, Denton. Great to hear you. The guy that you had on, Epstein or whatever his name was, he mentioned Debo's contract. They actually reworked Debo's contract.
Yeah, it's
I don't know if they gave him a little bit
guaranteed.
more money or they guaranteed it, but they did something to it.
They fully guaranteed
Which is why
it's
he's
like
not holding
17 million, something like that. So that's fully
Yeah.
guaranteed. Yeah, that's why he's not holding out.
It's funny. Like right now, Debo's actually going to make more money next year than Terry, which I wonder if that falls into the disrespect thing that Terry was talking about, which I think is ludicrous. I mean, he's under contract. And this Terry talk is fatiguing me a little bit, not so much because of the situation, but people's opinions about it. There was a caller 2 or 3 callers ago that talked about how they wasted time. I don't know why people don't read all the reports. Terry's team asked for so much money that almost turned the whole thing off. Right. So that's maybe one of the reasons that we're in this thing. But the question I really wanted to ask you, I'm just curious of your take on it. Do you think PR and AP greenlighted Kliff's comments today, or do you think that was on his own? Because I know Kliff and Jaden are close and they spend a lot of time together. Is Jaden talking through Kliff, or did the PR give him the green light? I'm curious because it is the first time this group has said, hey, come to work. We need you. They've been very tight-lipped up to now.
Are you talking specifically for today with what Kliff said?
Exactly. I mean, do you think they green-lighted what he said, or do you think that was on his own?
So there is not really a light when it comes to those sorts of things. The way that it generally works, and the PR group here has long been one of the really, really good ones in the NFL. A lot of them were of previous regimes, and even when life was going to hell with the owner and all of those things, the PR team was fantastic. You don't really greenlight these sorts of things. Like, I don't believe that there is a powwow before you get up here and say, all right, here's what you can say. Here's what you can't say. It is very much reaction based. So you get asked a question, you answer that question, and then if you need to have a PR powwow after that, you do it more so after. At this point, again, it's August 15th. Everybody knows the questions about Terry McLaurin are coming. Like, everyone is an adult. That's one of the very nice things about the way the regime currently operates. Everybody is very much an adult. So these things are going to happen. That's one of the things that I actually liked about the way that Kliff handled this, is he didn't say anything wildly disrespectful. He kept it all business, but there was this underlying inkling of, like, we need our best players to practice. If the best players aren't practicing, how can we expect them to be good? Pardon the AI thing, but he is really talking about practice, right? Like, he really wants his guys to practice. It's a little bit different in the NFL versus the NBA. He wants his guys out there. So I'm sure that maybe they mentioned something about it prior, but I don't know that there was like a meeting of the minds and saying, here's what we're going to say today about Terry when they asked. I think Kliff was asked a question, Kliff answered a question, and it didn't go to hell. So that's a very, very good sign. All right, 301-230-0980. Lap's been on hold for a minute. Lap, what's going on?
Hey, what's up, Rooster? How's it going, bro? I'm sorry.
I'm not Rooster yet.
Up,
He's coming up in an hour and a half.
No, my bad. No, I'm so used to talking to him, man. Sorry, bro. What's up, Dan? Sorry, bro.
I'm good, man.
You my guy, man. Yeah. So I don't know, man. This is just crazy and bizarre, man. It's just this whole thing, man. I like what Kliff said. It was just straight to the point. You know what I'm saying? He knows the situation. He knows what we have to work with. No one is really separating themselves, and they cut my guy, Michael Stratton or whatever.
Yeah.
So Stratton, yeah. So I'm hoping the Corey Brooks makes the team. I'm definitely hopeful for that. And then bringing Debo in, man, I think Adam was kind of prepared, for this. They knew they was going to have to address it. But the Debo thing is just, it looks like he's building good chemistry with Jaden. I'm just scared of his health, because everybody knows, like, he's the top 10, receiver when he's healthy. So we'll see, but I'm just disappointed that none of these guys are really separating themselves. Luke McCaffrey looks like some trash. Like, I was looking for him to have a big jump, and he still can, but it's just the way it's looking right now without Terry, man, it's just really sad. And that's a big question mark, going into the season, man. We don't need that. So hopefully we get the Terry thing signed soon, man. But it's
Lap, I appreciate it. It has been a bit of a struggle for, like, your Jalen Lanes and McCaffreys. And the expectation for Jalen Lane is not – he's had some really good days, and he's had some, hey, I'm a rookie in the NFL. days. And that's fair. I didn't think that he was going to just absolutely blow the doors off of everybody in his first training camp in the NFL. I was hoping to see a little bit more from Luke McCaffrey. And who knows, like there's been so many scenarios across the NFL's history and even across, Commanders, football team, Redskins history where some guy doesn't look very good in training camp and then the games are played and he looks really, really good. So maybe Luke or Jalen or whoever is going to be the next iteration of that here in DC. But I've definitely wanted to see a little bit more from Luke McCaffrey, and we really have not seen that. I wanted to see a little bit more from him as the season progressed last year, and it felt like as the season progressed, we saw less and less of him in favor of OZ and Jamison Crowder, and to an extent, like weirdly, KJ Osborne for a little bit. So I'm a little like iffy on Luke and what his role is going to be, at least on offense. In terms of kick returning, I do think there is a spot for him there, but you're right. There have not been a lot of receivers that have separated, and I mean that in a literal and metaphorical term, because they don't separate a lot on the field, and they also aren't separating from this large group of wide receivers that they have on the roster, and to the point where maybe they do adjust or examine some of the other receivers that are available, your Amari Coopers, Odell Beckham Jr.'s, or find whoever is going to be this year's Noah Brown. Remember, Noah Brown got cut last year, and then they signed him just about right before the season started. So maybe they're going to look at the market once cutdown day happens, and guys who were on current rosters are no longer on rosters, and they have a guy that they have their eyes on in that regard there. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Steve is in DC. Steve, what's going on?
Good. Thank you much. Yeah, I didn't take too much in the Kliff. He just said the obvious, said if you need to be on the practice field, if you want to grow as a player and as a team. I mean, that's basic. That I would also say Terry has to have like the worst agent of all time. Part of your responsibility as an agent, whether it's a football agent, an entertainment agent, or a broker, you have to give your client the realistic possibilities and tell them, I know you want that, but that's impossible. These are your realistic options. And Terry basically has two options. One, he can play out his contract and hope he gets more money next year and hope and pray he doesn't get injured. Or he can take the Commanders deal and take risk out of the table when they're offering, additional term, substantial guarantees, and taking all risk off the table. So, and he just needs to make a decision, do one or the other. But pretty much, I think what Kliff was saying, got to make a decision. You got to get out here.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you in that Terry needs to make a decision soon. So Kevin said yesterday that there is the potential that contract gets taken off the table, whatever offer they have. That is pretty normal in the NFL. That's pretty normal, I think, in most instances. If you get an offer, you have a certain amount of days to accept that offer before eventually the company, or in this case, the organization, has to figure out if you're not going to take it, well, somebody is going to take it, or we need to do something with this, right? We need to make it, in this case, we need to make a decision on whether or not you are going to play with a new deal or under this current contract, and then we will address this again moving forward. I would also like to point out, we're going to dunk on the agent here coming up in a few minutes, but it is also important to point out, like, Terry is not an idiot. The agent works for him, and if he might be getting bad advice, and I am of the belief that he is getting bad advice, but he's also not an idiot. Like, he is not just solely listening to the agent and doing whatever the agent says. This is not a weird robotic relationship. Terry is very much in control of his future as well. So while the agent might be giving him not great advice, Terry is also taking and heeding that advice, and he understands what his worth is, what he sets his particular value at. Like, I know it's fun to blame the agent because I have no emotional tie to the agent. You have no emotional tie to the agent. We have a much bigger emotional tie to Terry because he has been here for such a long period of time. But he isn't, like, Terry is partly responsible for everything that is happening here as well. He could sign a contract if he wanted to sign a contract extension, and he has not done that yet. They made a plan at the beginning of these negotiations to come up with some sort of a deal. And if their approach was that, hey, we are going to do something, we're going to ask for a number that is so substantially absurd that Adam Peters nearly walked away from the negotiation table. Like, he was in on these conversations. It's not like he just told Buddy Baker, come up with something, and then Buddy Baker is out here running around like a wild, reckless human being. He might be doing that. I don't know what he is, but Terry is responsible in these instances as well. It's not just Buddy Baker and Adam Peters, right? Like the agent works for Terry. Terry is fully engulfed in all of these conversations that are happening. With that said, is the agent a little bit over his head? Yes, he is. And we are getting more and more information that showcases that, including something that was said on this program yesterday. We'll play that for you when we get back. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton sitting in for Kevin here on the Team 980.
All right, some breaking news out of the NCAA. The University of Michigan will receive a fine of over $20 million, and head coach Sharon Moore will be suspended for an additional game that will be served in 2026. Sharon Moore will miss weeks 3 and 4 of the 2025 regular season as a self-imposed punishment for the Connor Stallions sign-stealing scandal. Other punishments were handed down, including orders for Connor Stallions and coach Jim Harbaugh to the NFL, UDFA, and former Texas wide receiver Isaiah Bond and second-round pick from Ohio State Quinshon Judkins are signing with the Browns after having their respective charges dropped in court. Bond was no billed on sexual assault, meaning that the state is not pursuing charges. Judkins' battery charges stemming from a domestic incident were also dropped. We say so long to former Washington Redskin and Jacksonville Jaguar guard Brandon Scherff, who quietly retired this offseason. Scherff, drafted by Washington in the first round of the 2015 NFL Draft, was a bright spot in an otherwise forgettable era of Washington football. He now calls it a career. And the Nats, they DFA first baseman Nathaniel Lowe the day after hitting a grand slam versus Kansas City to make room for the return of outfielder Dylan Cruz. Last night, the Nats beat the Phillies by a score of 3-2. Brad Lord with a solid outing, only giving up 2 earned runs. Rookie reliever Shinosuke Ogasawara picks up his first career win after striking out Kyle Schwarber. Cole Henry earns the save. Looking to carry that momentum into tonight as they continue their weekend series versus the Phillies. Mackenzie Gore will take on Zach Wheeler tonight at Nats Park. First pitch at 6:45. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 6:15. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1, and you can catch Denton's office throughout football season and then some. Don't forget to like the streams and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin here on the Team 980 on a Friday. You can tweet me at the Denton Day. We're getting closer and closer to another preseason game. Still no Terry McLaurin, but we're kind of done for a second on Terry himself. I want to get to the agent. I have done my best to be a happy-go-lucky, friendly media guy when it comes to the agent, because I don't know him. I don't know Buddy Baker at all. I've never met the man. I've heard a few things about him, but like not enough to take to the air. You know, just a couple of people being like, you know, he's an interesting cat, but that's what agents are. They're basically used car salesmen, but they are just representing players. And in this instance, you're representing a deal of millions and millions of dollars. So the agents are they're a little quirky. Like that just is what it is. But this whole process has really given us a new character to focus on in Buddy Baker. And while I think that this scenario going to mid-August is Adam Peters' fault, Terry's fault, it is also very much the fault of the agent. So we got a little bit of information yesterday from Charles Robinson about the negotiating process that I found to be very, very stunning, right? And I want to play this for you, Max. This is the third cut that we have on the sheet here. Here's what Charles Robinson said about what the original offer was and where we are at now in this process with negotiating between the Commanders and Terry McLaurin.
I think everyone's being careful about not saying what the initial number was, but I will say it was what the initial number was high enough that it almost completely broke down conversation instantaneously between the two parties. Like, I think the Commanders were stunned at initially what the ask was. And to me, the inference is this was like nearly top tier 1 money. So are we talking 35 million annual average value? Are we talking beyond 35? Are we talking creeping up to 40? Like what was the initial ask? I think as things moved for both sides, I think we got to this point of the DK Metcalf contract. The $33 million a year, the $60 plus million guaranteed.
So originally, the asking price was so high that Washington nearly stopped. And he alluded to tier 1 money, which Jamar Chase gets $40 million, Justin Jefferson gets $35 million, CeeDee Lamb gets $34. That's kind of like your tier 1 of wide receiver contracts at the moment. So if he's saying it was borderline or in the tier 1 money, effectively what he is saying is that it was around $35 million with the potential of that number being higher. Now, I remember a report or a rumor that surfaced at this point months ago, and I did a YouTube video. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. If you're watching us now, we appreciate it. I had a Denton's office about this particular report, which was that Terry McLaurin is going to get $36 million. And I saw that report and I laughed. And you saw that report and you probably laughed because you're like, there's no chance that he's going to get 37, 36, whatever million dollars. Like 32 has always been the cap. If it's not 32, if it's 32, you're signing that deal. It's not going to go over 32. But so we've heard these numbers being thrown around. If they came to Adam Peters and said $37 million, please, $36 million, even if it's $35 million, and you're looking as Adam Peters and you're potentially, the number we've heard from Washington's side has been $25 million, $26 million. If you're $9 to $10 million off of the initial negotiating price, you're going to be very, very confused as well. You're going to be like, I don't know what the point of what is happening is right here. It's not abnormal to be off in the initial negotiation. We all know how these work. We're adults. One side sets it high, expecting it to come down. One side sets it low, expecting it to come up. And then eventually you meet in the middle. That's basic negotiating tactics. If you're coming to the table with $35 million from the jump and they're coming with 25, those conversations are probably going to come to a halt. God forbid if it's any larger than that. So while I do think, Terry is going to get and receive a little bit of blame in this because he has not signed the contract when he could have, there might be some bad advice coming from the agent if you are meeting with Terry prior to the start of negotiations. And by the way, the start of negotiations was prior to Eastern Motors, right? Eastern Motors was a month ago today. The start of negotiation was prior to Eastern Motors, and by at least a month, because Terry said they hadn't spoken in months. So if you're doing this all back then, you had to have a meeting of the minds and you come together, and then the agent is giving you advice. This is what I think you are worth. Here's X, Y, and Z as to why I believe you're worth that. Let's go and let's put it in front of the team. Mike Jones was on with Kevin yesterday, and here's what Mike Jones said about the agent and potential bad advice that the agent is giving.
I worry about the advice that he's getting from his agent, from talking to a number of people. It sounds like, it's too bad he doesn't have somebody else in his ear, because it doesn't seem like he's getting a lot of wise counsel on this. But again, both sides need to come off of, something. They need to give a little bit, and find a compromise to get this thing done.
What is going on with the agent? I've been trying to be good, Max. I've been trying to be good. I don't want to just come and skewer a guy who I don't know. I'm not in the room. Like, I handle these scenarios with a little bit of grace. I see fans complain about the agent, and that is normal. Like, the fans they love Terry, so they're not going to come after Terry. They like Adam Peters, so they're not going to come after Adam Peters. This is in wrestling, a triple threat match is made because one guy has to take the pin. That's pretty much it. You don't want either side to lose. You make it a triple threat match, so one guy has to take the pin. And in this instance, that is Buddy Baker. So everyone is going to come and just dunk on Buddy Baker. And when fans are doing that, like, I look at it from afar and I'm like, yeah, they don't like the agent, but we don't know anything about him. Like, unless you know him personally, which I don't know that anyone, or at least a ton of people in our fan base do, we don't really know. We don't really know. When Logan Paulson says on Take Command, hey, I think Terry might be getting some bad information. And now when Mike Jones says with Kevin yesterday, I think Terry might be getting some bad information, when big-time media voices that don't just take these, not an accusation, but don't take these sorts of comments and just toss them around, when they start saying things like this, there is a little bit of smoke to the fire on the potential of the agent getting either too involved or being a little too over enthusiastic in relation to certain numbers that he feels that Terry is worthy of. And a negotiation is very, very simple in 2025. Like, if you dumb it down, it's one side comes in with a number and they have a list of reasons as to why they feel like this number is accurate. And then the other side comes in with a completely different number, and they come in with a list of reasons as to why that number they feel is an accurate number for what this contract should be. And then again, you eventually whittle it down to somewhere in the middle. You get the happy medium. Everybody's happy. We hug it out. We have a press conference with lapels on that are burgundy and gold, and we keep it moving, right? Or some form of burgundy, not the gold thing. We're not pulling no Carson Wentz. But you do all those things. What did they walk into the meeting with? If they're going to set a substantially high number that was so high where Adam Peters was like, this is not a real conversation, what was the numbers? What was the list of reasons that they are bringing into the meeting to justify the numbers? Because you have to have some sort of data points. Now, if you want to blend the two of them and have, here's like X, Y, and Z, what he does really well on the field, but then on top of that, look at how great he is as a human. Look at how good he is as a steward for the franchise. He represents everything that you want as a commander. We believe that should be factored into the negotiation process as well, along with the things that he does really well on the field. But what were those things? Because there's not a lot of numbers that you are going to be able to produce for Terry that would say $35 million, tier one wide receiver money. There's not a lot that you can produce right now to say DK Metcalf money. Regardless of how you feel about DK, there can be a conversation on who is better with Terry and DK. I'll hear that. Right. I do think there is a little bit of validity to that conversation. Regardless of all of those things, what numbers are you providing to a front office that you know is analytical? I do not believe that Buddy Baker is dumb enough to walk into the negotiation and think that Adam Peters, who had just hired a bunch of dorks in the front office — dorks is a respectable term — but hired a bunch of like Ivy League dorks and analytic guys in the front office, I don't believe that he walked in there thinking that there was going to be an emphasis on like the personality stuff over the numbers. This guy's trying to take a franchise that was literally at rock bottom, but rock bottom of rock bottom, like further than just the normal rock bottom can go. This franchise was literally sitting on the cusp of hell because of what Dan Snyder had done to it for such a long time. He is attempting to lift them at the very least to purgatory and then get them all the way up to heaven at some point. He's going to do it with his process. His process has always been numbers. We have seen this before. Adam Peters is a numbers-driven guy. That's how San Francisco has been as successful as they have. They're a numbers-driven operation and organization. Did he really think that he was going to come in here with some good numbers, but not great numbers, and think that he was going to get $35 to $36 million? The more people that are reputable and talk to sources around the league that are coming out to point to Buddy Baker and say, this guy is part of the problem as to why this deal is not being done, the more that I'm starting to legitimately believe that this guy is not just part of the problem, but a massive cog in the machine that is going the wrong direction. Now, Terry is still at the wheel, but he is, and it can only do as much as the agent is going to allow him in this negotiation process. Like, Terry is not just going to get there and say, if you give me 27, I'll do it. Like, you have to have some sort of representation, look over contracts. That's the way that this works. It'd be idiotic if you did anything other. So Terry is at the wheel, but if the agent is so gung-ho on getting just this massive number to, I don't know if it's to build his own brand, to build his own ego, whatever the case is, if you're just going to let this agent go buck wild on the scenario, you are going to need to look around for some other representation. But the problem is you're so deep into this, I don't know that other representation will be able to just come off the sideline and immediately get you a deal that gets you ready and amped up for week number 1 against the Giants. We're midway through August, legitimately midway through August. A contract has not been signed. The man has not practiced. And you got 4 weeks before a really solid defense in New York is going to be on the other side. And we don't even know if Terry's in football shape. And, oh, by the way, Kliff Kingsbury may have let it slip that the guy's not in meetings a ton, or at least as much as I thought that he was, because I thought he was just living in the film room, in the meeting room. And Kliff Kingsbury basically said, I don't have as much contact with him as I would like. Today has not been a great day for Terry. I want the man to get paid. I want him to be a Commander for life. Today has not been a great day in terms of the PR negotiations between Terry and the Commanders. We'll talk some actual football, some of the stuff that happened today at practice. Ben Standig is going to join us when we get back. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Dente sitting in for Kevin here on the Team 980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin here on the Team 980. We're going to talk with Ben Sandig at 12:30. A little bit of a communication situation. So Ben is going to join us at 12:30 here on the Team 980. So there was something that was said yesterday by Charles Robinson that I thought was more interesting than the Terry contract stuff. It was in relation to the Terry contract stuff, but I thought it was way more interesting because it wasn't exclusively about the Terry contract stuff. This is what Charles Robinson said about Adam Peters as a negotiator, and I'll tell you why I think this is wonderful for Washington.
I had one executive when I was kind of, going through my paces, and I reached out to somebody who knew Adam Peters really well, and I said, what do you think of this situation? And he said, I think people are going to find out a lot about Adam Peters right now because I do not like negotiating with him. He has an edge to him that people, I think, don't necessarily understand. And they're going to see that now in this negotiation. And I think they have in some respects because Adam Peters has been pretty clear he's not going to budge.
So Adam Peters has an edge when it comes to negotiating, and he is not going to budge. Here's the thing. There's one thing that Charles Robinson got wrong with this, Max. One thing. We've already seen this. We have video proof of this happening because the team gave us video proof of this happening. If you are a regular watcher of their command log series on YouTube, the way that I am, you have seen this before. Now, right now, it is a little unfortunate because this is being spoken within the realm of the Terry contract, and it sucks that it's Adam Peters versus Terry right now. I can acknowledge that. But we have seen this. In fact, not only have we seen this, it was celebrated massively to the point where everyone was chomping at Howie Roseman saying, hey, Adam Peters dogged Howie Roseman in the draft. The trade that ended up with Philadelphia getting Cooper DeJean, but it allowed Washington to get more players, more guys that, had the almighty RAS score. And now Adam Peters dogged Howie Roseman for the Jahan Dotson trade. They got draft picks for Jahan Dotson that they ended up flipping for guys like Marshawn Lattimore and Deebo Samuel. They got a third for Jahan Dotson, but only had to give up like a fifth for Deebo Samuel. Like, there is a negotiating edge to Adam Peters that we have not seen here before. And this was not a negative thing. I can understand, and Charles Robinson addressed this on social media yesterday. I can understand why you would hear, I hate negotiating against him, and think that it is like a deep hatred. I think that is more just executive to executive talk of like, I know that he is going to ask for more. He is not going to be walked all over by me, the opposition, the way that guys in the past have seemingly been walked all over, both here and elsewhere in the NFL. There's an edge to Adam Peters. This is kind of what we have meant for such a long time, Max. It feels like when we have made the argument of let Adam cook. When you're talking about let Adam cook, let AP cook, all of the memes that came forth last year and all of the merchandise that was sold with let Adam Peters cook, this is what that means. It's that you have a guy that is going into a negotiation with a plan, and he is going to use every single bit of leverage that he has to get what he wants, to better his operation, to lift his team in the rebuilding or recalibrating of the organization here in Washington. And just seeing that in the draft, like, these comments are not a surprise to me. I love it, actually. Like, I hear an executive tell a media member this, and you as an executive, you're telling a media member this kind of under the belief that eventually this is going to be made public in some way, shape, or form. He didn't drop any names, so we don't know who it was, but you know that this is going to be made public in some way, shape, or form. When you're saying this to somebody that you know is going to make it public, it means that Adam Peters is really, really good. And how many times did we see all over these series that they put out on YouTube? How many times did we see somebody try and trade with Adam Peters and him basically be like, you're not giving me enough? No. The answer is no. And that's basic for general managers, but we've gotten the opportunity to see it. And you know who else is really, really good at these sorts of things? It's why we celebrated it as heavily as we did when we saw it initially. Howie Roseman is really, really good at these sorts of things. And as much as we hate Philadelphia, and trust me, we hate those bastards. As much as we hate them, you recognize and respect the way that Howie Roseman has built a roster because he has good to great at every single position in a way that Washington is still trying to achieve. They've gotten closer, certainly since this time 2 years ago, God almighty. But they've gotten closer from last year to this year. I think they've bettered their roster. But you look at Philadelphia, it's good to great, and you can't really point to a trade that Howie Roseman has drastically lost. We kind of thought Adam Peters got the better of him with the Cooper DeJean thing, but then the Cooper DeJean ended up being pretty darn good. Put on for us vanilla men out there in the corners. A white corner is hard to find. It just is. Cooper DeJean ended up being really, really good. So I don't know that you could say like Adam Peters, swindled him on that one. He definitely got the better of him with the Jahan Dotson stuff, but maybe Jahan Dotson's a breakout year. But that's the one. That's literally the one that you can look at and say that's the trade that Howie Roseman has lost. He has put together strings of trades over the course of years that built a Super Bowl, not just contender, a Super Bowl champion, and then tore some of it down to rebuild a Super Bowl champion and now an organization that is perennially going to be a Super Bowl contender for years to come. You're trying to emulate in some way, shape, or form that. You realize that Howie Roseman right now is the top dog. You are trying to be the top dog. And in turn, if you end up being what Howie Roseman is, you take this team in Washington and lead them and bring them up to a championship and to them then being a perennial Super Bowl contender. But you're not doing that by being a nice guy. You have to have a little bit of an edge. I would be dying to know how the conversations went when the trade for Laramie Tunsil took place, or how the conversations went when the trade for Deebo Samuel took place, or Marshawn Lattimore took place. Because we kind of, the Laramie Tunsil thing was a little bit different. But the Deebo thing, we've been rumored, you get it, you can draw the connections, but that's literally Adam Peters negotiating against his former bosses and then winning the negotiation against his former bosses, assuming that Deebo is healthy this year. Now, that's a big if, right? You got to be healthy. You got to play really, really well. But assuming that Deebo is healthy this year, you win that negotiation because you're not getting a guy in the 5th round that is going to produce more than Deebo Samuel. They drafted Jalen Lane before the 5th round, and we don't even know if he is going to produce to the way that Deebo Samuel is going to produce this year, right? So you get a guy that comes in immediately and starts producing. You could say the same thing with Laramie Tunsil. How many left tackles were you going to get that are better than Laramie Tunsil in the upcoming draft? Not a lot. And maybe one or two becomes as good as Laramie Tunsil, but they're certainly not going to become as good as Laramie Tunsil is immediately. I do think last year expedited the process of building a winner, but the fact that Adam Peters is not effectively going around and consistently getting swindled, but doing the swindling is something to me, Max, that was unbelievable to hear. Just over the moon. Like, yes, we are finally a real operation.
We've got one.
We have finally got one, a guy that is going to better this operation for years and years to come. And we kind of seen a little bit of how he is not like a big softy. I think previous big softies would have kept Dominique Hampton a little bit longer. But Adam Peters is a straight shooter. Hey, we don't really have a spot for you. Go find one somewhere else. He did that with a bunch of the Ron guys. Now, there was a little bit of extra emphasis to do that because Ron didn't draft very well, so it wasn't very hard to get rid of a lot of the Ron Rivera guys. But he is not wasting anybody's time in these negotiations as well. Now, you would hope that, the Terry thing would be maybe a little bit easier, I would say. I don't know. I want the Terry thing to be done so we can just talk about football and see him on the field. And it does stink. I will reiterate that it is now Buddy Baker and Terry McLaurin versus Adam Peters. It feels like at the negotiating table. I was a little upset in reading the John Keim article on ESPN, and this has been taken by others as well, eventually they're going to get to $28 million and the deal will be done. Can we skip the eventually? Do we need to hold this out or hold this in? But do we need to prolong this period if you're both going to get to $28 million, somebody just suggests $28 million now, sign the deal, and then get Terry on the field. This doesn't feel like rocket science to me. And I feel like I'm a decently intelligent human being. If you both know, or if people are starting to talk and they're like, yeah, like both sides are going to get to 28 eventually, like just get there now. You're wasting precious time. Maybe that's what Kliff was saying today. That was his message to the ownership group too, and the negotiators. If you're eventually going to get to a number and you both kind of know that, get there. What is the reason to not do it? It got me acting like Shedeur Sanders. Get there. Get there. The time is a ticking. Like, get there immediately. I don't understand why, if you think that's going to happen. So I took that away from Keim's article of like, yeah, they're going to get there. What is the holdup there? Adam Peters does have a history, and San Francisco had this history, but Peters himself, I don't think people realize, or maybe it's just not spoken about as much as it should have. Sam Cosmi was signed to his extension early in September. He participated in everything, but he was signed to his extension early in September. That seems to be the way that Peters likes to operate. They like to beat the buzzer. I think the Adam Peters operation, when it comes to some of these extensions, it will not happen with Jaden. I can't imagine. You're going to get that one done as early as possible because that's going to be just an earth-shattering contract when that time comes up. But they take these things deep into the shot clock, man, and they try and beat the buzzer. They signed Cosmi to that extension very, very late in the offseason, like I think 2 or 3 days before they started the regular season last year in Tampa Bay. So it's not abnormal that he himself is going to take these negotiations deep. I know everyone has talked about his past with San Francisco and the way that they operate in Denver and New England, but we literally do have proof of what he has done here in this operation with that Sam Cosmi contract extension. So it's not abnormal for them to take these sorts of things late. I would like it to not be late with Terry. I want Terry on the field. The difference between Cosmi and Terry is that Cosmi was out there and Terry was not out there. And I understand it from Terry's perspective, but on August 15th, it's a little bit more frustrating than it was on July 27th. On July 27th, you're like, all right, like we still got time. We still got time. You play the second preseason game coming up here in a matter of days, and your best wide receiver is still not under contract for God knows what reason at this point. AAV guarantees length of the deal. I don't know what it is. I am also of the belief that the length of the deal could be a factor in this. If the extension does go into effect next year, which if they really wanted to, they could probably make it go into effect this year. It would take a little bit of maneuvering of the money, but this is why you hire a bunch of the Ivy League dorks in the front office. They're good at that sort of thing, so they probably could if they really, really wanted to. But if the extension begins in his age 31 season, I'd probably ask for like a 3-year deal or a 4-year. I'm not going for that 2-year deal. I want a little bit of financial security if this is going to be my last significant contract. We're not going to call it big, although this contract will be bigger than his last contract. But if this is my last significant contract, I would like that contract to stretch as much as I possibly could, understanding that the NFL is not forever. I've gotten a good 7 years out of it. Let's get to 10. Get all of the benefits that come with getting to 10 years in the NFL. And there are some very big retirement benefits that come with making it to 10 years in the NFL. Let's get all of those things. And then I can be a commander for forever. And I can open a bar in One Loudon when the time is over, or whatever other interests that Terry has. I don't know what his other hobbies are, if he's like a real estate guy or whatever. But whatever his other interests are, I could start to plant those roots in the greater Northern Virginia DMV area and then make lots and lots of money, because we have seen over the course, and this is true with every single city. It's true with every single city. If you are a whatever for life, a commander in this case for life, Redskin football team guy, whatever. If you are a commander for life, it's very easy to make money after that, as long as you have smart investors, right? As long as you don't get swindled by a bunch of dudes that are trying to steal some money for you, you can very easily make that work. All right, Ben Standig coming up in about 20 minutes from now. We got some daily news to get into, though, and we want to look at what's going to happen with Cincinnati. Also, actually, hold on. Forget the daily news. Something really made me upset yesterday. It's not Dan Quinn's fault. It's Roger Goodell's fault. We dive into that next. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day sitting in for Kevin on the Team 980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin here on the Team 980 at the Denton Day on Twitter. Ben standing in about 15 minutes here on the program. Yesterday, it was announced that Washington and Baltimore canceling their joint practice. I am furious at this, Max. Furious. It's not a Washington problem. It's not a Baltimore problem. This falls solely on Roger Goodell, and this falls solely on the NFL for being morons with the scheduling. Washington plays a Monday night game against Cincinnati, and it's for ESPN to get their Monday night booth in action. And because of that, you're playing a day later than most teams, in some instances 2 days later than most teams. I mean, we got a jam-packed weekend of preseason football, a couple games today, a ton on Saturday, and a few games on Sunday. You play later than all of those teams, and in turn, you get less rest, which makes it very difficult on recovery. And then you got to recover, because if you're playing on Monday and then like 2 days later, you have to have a joint practice that's live, that's impossible. No one is going to sign up for that sort of thing. It's an idiotic decision to do if you want to protect your players, which allegedly the NFL wants to protect the players. Now, the NFL does not control who does joint practices. That is two teams coming together and saying, hey, we're playing each other in the preseason. Can we get there a day early, have a joint practice? And you can say yes, you can say no. We know that there were some times in DC where there was a lot of no's. I mean, we all remember the great J.D. McKissick rejection, because they took J.D. McKissick from Buffalo. Buffalo got so mad, they said, we hate you. We are not going to join practice with you. All for J.D. McKissick. Good player. I don't know if he was worth all that. Anyway, Roger Goodell scheduling this and the NFL scheduling this, they are to blame for this. Why on God's green earth did you actually need a preseason Monday Night Football? Outside of television ratings, and outside of this hilarious idea of, well, it's Monday night, we want our Monday Night Football team in the booth. Like those jokers can't do a game on Saturday. It's not actually that important. None of these games matter. Well, you completely blew up the schedule for two teams that are legitimately have Super Bowl aspirations. You completely blew up the schedule. That preseason game is going to be awful between these two teams because nobody's going to play, which that was going to be the case regardless. That's what happens with 3 preseason games. But now you rip the ability of a joint practice away from these two because you had to schedule someone on Monday Night Football, but knowing your preseason was going to end on Saturday of next week. It's just like, we knew this as soon as the schedule dropped. Like, we looked at this with clear eyes and we're like, this is dumb. This is idiotic. Why are they doing this? I don't know if anyone got an answer. Maybe somebody went on with like the junkies and they got an answer. I don't know why that decision was made outside of ratings, money. And I'm not going to get on here and be idiotic and say, who's going to watch a preseason game on Monday? We all going to watch. We're going to watch. Like, I don't care if it was our team, if it was somebody else's team. We're going to watch a preseason game on a Monday. I get that. But I just hate how the optics of this look. And Washington is on the short end of the stick with this. Baltimore, though, I don't care about them. But Baltimore is on the short end of the stick of this. You are robbing two teams of an opportunity to get together with a joint practice. And it's not like the NFL did not know that. Washington and Baltimore joint practice every single year. They're so close to one another, it'd be idiotic not to. Like the Rams and the Chargers are joint practicing because they basically share facilities, or they share the stadiums. Facilities are different, but they're within a reasonable range. Do you know when they're playing? They're playing this weekend. New York, the Giants and the Jets, same thing. Do you know when they're playing? This weekend. So you put Washington in a situation where you play the close team at the very end, but we're also going to really hijack your schedule a little bit, and it's going to be too close, and now you're going to be screwed. Sorry about that. XO Roger Goodell. He is the one to blame for this. Now I don't get to see Jaden go up against a Baltimore defense. It's pretty good. We don't get to see Josh Connolly get some reps against Mike Green. Mike Green has had silly bend in some of the preseason games and some of the practices, showing off a little bit of the athleticism there. that Baltimore defense was, struggling at the end of, or at the beginning of last year, got a little bit better towards the end of last year, really good 2 years ago. It would have been very nice to see those two come together, maybe in some weird, wacky, crazy world. Terry signs like today, and then he would have got to participate in the joint practice in some capacity. And instead, we get none of that. And they had good work against the New England Patriots, but it would have been really nice to get good work against the New England Patriots, who are going to be a fine team in the NFL, and then go get some like really great work against the Baltimore Ravens, who are going to be a really, really good team, borderline great team in the NFL, and you're robbed of that. Dan Quinn said yesterday that did not adjust the plan for them. I hope he has adjusted the plan at least a little bit. I am under the impression that guys are going to play on Monday, and I mean starters are going to play on Monday. I would like to see big number 78 out there on Monday. I said when I was sitting in for Kevin on Monday, this previous Monday, you're an idiot if you put your number one quarterback out there against your not number one or with your non-number ones on the offensive line. So I don't want to see Jaden in there with a bunch of guys that are fighting for roster spots. I want to see Jaden in there with a bunch of guys that are fighting for chemistry, that know we're starting week one. We're just trying to, get used to playing next to one another, but our communication is good. No one's going to be trying to do a little bit too much that's then going to allow for a big sack on Jaden. Not that he's going to take an Anthony Richardson sack. He's far too good of a quarterback to take an Anthony Richardson sack. He's way too smart to take that Anthony Richardson sack. But I want to see him out there. I want to see Laramie Tunsil out there. I want to see all of the ones, whoever you are going to plan to put out there. If Brandon Coleman cannot go, I want to see that person out there. That is also becoming a little bit of a worry. We talk a lot about the Terry stuff. The Brandon Coleman situation and him not being available for practice is a little head scratching. Ben Standing is going to be on with us here in a few moments. We'll get his thoughts on what that looked like today, what the offensive line has looked like without Brandon Coleman. Can't anticipate that he's going to play on a Monday. I'm getting a little bit worried about the Brandon Coleman stuff, but I want to see the starters play at least a little bit, because we've seen in years past with teams here, but also with teams that are not here, the preseason is beneficial, at least in some capacity. You don't got to play a lot. I just want 2 series. Give me 2 series. That could be 6 plays. That could be 16 plays. I don't care what it is. I want 2 series. Let Jaden go march down on a bad Cincinnati defense. Build a little bit of momentum on offense, because the offense has struggled tremendously, it feels like, in a lot of these preseason practices. Build a little bit of momentum and come out there, everybody feeling good. Just give me 2 series, and we can get all of that sort of stuff out there. I want to see these guys play, but robbing us of that Baltimore joint practice, I think, puts extra pressure on Monday night for those guys to play. And that's going to put a little bit of extra pressure on Dan Quinn and the coaching staff in terms of the plan. He could say that they have not adjusted, but I think he was also just hearing about that. I mean, he was on the conversations, but it was still very, very new in these conversations of like, hey, we're not going to be able to do this. How do we want to adjust from here? So I hope there has been some sort of adjustment made. I don't think that you're going to see anybody in that preseason game against Baltimore outside of like maybe your Ja'Cory Brookses, maybe your Jalen Lane a little bit, maybe Bill Merritt, but I don't think you'll see a lot of guys that the team has high hopes of playing in 2025 in the Baltimore game, but I do think you should see a lot of them in the Cincinnati game. We'll talk with Ben Standing coming up next year, what he thinks the plan will be against Cincinnati and just how everybody looked today at practice. We heard it was a good day for the offense. How good of a day was it? Ben Standing next.
All right, here's what's happening on this Friday at noon. The Michigan football program will receive a fine of over $20 million, and head coach Sharon Moore will be suspended for an additional game that will be served in 2026. Moore already slated to miss weeks 3 and 4 of the 2025 regular season as punishment for the Connor Stallion sign-stealing scandal. And undrafted free agent and former Texas wide receiver Isaiah Bond and second-round pick from Ohio State Quinton Judkins are signing with the Cleveland Browns after having their respective charges dropped in court. Bond was no build on sexual assault, meaning that the state is not pursuing charges, and Judkins' battery charges stemming from a domestic violence incident were dropped. We also say so long to Washington Redskin and Jacksonville Jaguar guard Brandon Scherf, who quietly retired this offseason. Scherf, drafted by Washington in the first round of the 2015 NFL Draft, was a bright spot in an otherwise forgettable era of Washington football. Now he calls it a career. Plus, the Nats, they designate for assignment first baseman Nathaniel Lowe the day after he hits a grand slam against Kansas City to make room for the return of outfielder Dylan Cruz. Last night, the Nats, they beat the Phillies by a score of 3-2. Brad Lord with a solid outing, only giving up 2 earned runs. Rookie reliever Shinosuke Ogasawara picks up his first career win after striking out Kyle Schwarber. And Cole Henry, he earns the save. The Nats are looking to carry that momentum into tonight as they continue their weekend series versus the Philadelphia Phillies. Mackenzie Gore taking on Zach Wheeler tonight at Nats Park. First pitch at 6:45. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 6:15. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1, and you can catch Denton's office throughout football season and then some. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports, and that is what's trending.
It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin here on a Friday. Ben Standing, good enough to join us here as he does each and every, well, you join us a lot more than just Monday and Friday during the season, but we are gracious for the time anyway. Last Man Standing podcast and his Substack on his Twitter at Ben Standing for all of his coverage. How was practice today? I was told that the offense looked a little bit better.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I mean, Jaden hit some throws down the field. Better is, I guess, all relative to these things. But yeah, I guess you could say that. I think the one thing that was most interesting to me. Now, look, they rotate the receivers around. The backups play with the first team sometimes and things like that. But it did seem to me that there was more Ja'Cory Brooks and Tay Martin out there than with the first than I had seen previously. So that was at least notable because, as we know, the receiver room has been rough without Terry McLaurin and Noah Brown. And, they've, other than adding River Craycraft yesterday, who's a guy who's been around, they haven't really done anything different in that room. So, that's something that was interesting today for me. But beyond that, it was a more physical practice. They had pads on, which is good because it's been relatively light here since they got back from New England.
River Craycraft is a badass name, though. So he's definitely in one of the name top of the name category with the team. How has Ja'Cory Brooks looked? I know he's been a fan favorite this offseason. Does it look like he's going to make the 53?
We'll see. I think the last two preseason games for a guy like him will mean a lot. The athletic traits, I get why people find him tantalizing. He was a 5-star recruit at Alabama. He transferred out eventually to Louisville, had a 1,000-yard season last year with Tyler Shook, likely or possibly the same starting quarterback throwing to him. But he's just been inconsistent, right? He'll make a good catch and then there'll be a drop, and that's where it's like, all right, well, that's a young guy being inconsistent. At least what I was looking at today, he seemed to be, more steady. He was catching the balls Jaden was throwing to him. So, look, if you're telling me that Terry is back and Noah Brown's back and you got Deebo Samuel, Jalen Lane, and let's just say Luke McCaffrey still around, I'd probably rather take a shot on a guy like Ja'Cory Brooks than going with one of these veterans who just has not shown much yet, hasn't shown much upside. But, again, even if he were to make the team, that's way different than suggesting he can replace Terry or Noah Brown however long they're out. We're just talking about, depth and potential, not the guy that can fill in. And that's the rub right now is they just don't have anybody on the outside that you could count on if you had to right now.
Does Brooks play in the return game at all? Has he practiced in the return game at all?
He has return experience, played on special teams. He had a couple punt blocks in college. So, yeah, that's always a factor when you're talking these last couple of guys. And that's the thing, like Michael Gallup, who's, an established receiver who retired last year because of injuries, but he's back this year. He historically does not play on special teams. And if you're not going to be a top 4 rotation guy, then I don't quite know how you're going to fit here. And, like I said, ultimately Ja'Cory Brooks is a young guy. And, I'm not saying that KJ Osborne and Chris Moore are over the hill, but, they've been around a bit, so you kind of know where they're at. So I think it would be more like that. But I would feel better taking a Ja'Cory Brooks if I felt settled with my top 4 guys. And right now that is the opposite of that, is very unsettled because of Terry's hold in and Noah Brown still being off the field because of his knee issue.
What did you think of what Kliff said today about it? Felt like kind of urging Terry to get back to practice.
Yeah, I mean, sure. You would expect that the offensive coordinator would like his best receiver back, but it's the first time we've heard somebody from the building kind of say, hey, we're running out of time here. I mean, Dan Quinn's been very diplomatic about the whole thing, understandably so. He doesn't want to say anything that would, potentially mess with the contract discussions. But yeah, I mean, look, I think for Kliff Kingsbury, his job is to run the offense. The only returning receiver last year, that played at all for Jaden was Luke McCaffrey, who's not like he did that much. He's working with completely new guys who are just, in a lot of ways, probably are not worthy of being on an NFL roster. He's hitting Zach Ertz. Great. They look like they're in midseason form. He and Deebo, again, had a nice play on a high crossing route that connected on. They've been making plays all throughout camp. When he has those guys who are legit players, it's been fine. It's just the other part of it, that's the rub. So, yeah, if you're Kliff, you're like, hey, when you guys are asking me what how's the offense looking, what am I going to tell you? and not only are they missing Terry and Noah Brown, of course, they're without their 2 starting guards. We knew Sam Cosmi would be out, at least until probably the first few weeks of the regular season. And Brandon Coleman, we're not getting many updates. They don't have to give us injury updates at this point. So he's been out for over a week. I don't know when he's returning. But, when you do that, not only does it mean you have two backups, and well, Andrew Wiley and Nick Allegretti have played the position, but, it's not the guys you would have typically. And now it also means that the second unit has the backups to the backups in, and now all of a sudden it's, it's kind of impacting all the way around this team in practice. So, yeah, it's not ideal, and I understand Kliff's frustration.
Is Brian Robinson going to be on the roster week 1?
Why would you ask me that then? Yeah, I mean, look, I said on my podcast a couple days ago that, I forget exactly how I phrased it, but I think it's a pretty good shot that he is not on the roster. Now, there's a lot of things that would have to go into that. Bill has got to be healthy, and he did practice today, but he had missed a couple of practices with a shoulder injury that he had in the New England game. They have to feel good that if Robinson were to be out, that Chris Rodriguez could give you some of that interior running, especially on short yardage plays. It would be ideal if Terry were to get back, so you would have, at least another guy on offense that you would feel really good about. But I think the argument to move on from B-Rob, he's a fine player. If they go with him and Eckler, that's fine. But he's not a big play guy. He only had, I believe, 4 plays last year of 20 or more yards. And they are definitely looking for more of that. I think they're also looking for 3 down backs because I'm not saying 3 down in the sense like you have one guy playing all the time, but when they're on the field, the defense can't assume anything, right? I mean, Austin Eckler, when he's out there, he could run between the tackles. He could catch a screen. He could, be involved in some other kind of trickeration. He can do all these things. I think, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, again, he's barely played. I get it. But like the little bit we even just saw in the first preseason game, you saw him run with some power and force. You saw him catch a pass, look comfortable doing it, and then immediately make a move to evade a defender. That's a guy that could play on 3 downs. They just didn't use Robinson last year in the passing game. So to me, I think there's just a lot of variables, and there's even some other points that, I won't get into right here, but I just think that there's reason to think that to maximize what Kliff Kingsbury wants to do, having a running back who is out there you don't know what he's going to do. And again, when they're doing the hurry up offense, right, it's not like you can make a lot of substitutions. So if he's out there, you kind of, if you're the defense, kind of know he's not going to catch the pass. So you can kind of focus in on him in a different way. And I don't know, I think to me, they have enough interesting running backs to maybe make a move. Whether they will, who knows? Krosky-Merritt's got to stay healthy. To move on from B-Rob right now when the rest of the offense looks dicey is not necessarily logical. But I do think there's enough reasons to think this is a decent possibility. Again, I'm not reporting this, but I just, I've listened to this for weeks and months, and I just think that the possibility cannot be ignored.
What about this guy, Demetric Felton? It feels like he's the running back that's not talked about a ton, but it does kind of, I have at least gotten the feel that they do kind of like him a little bit.
Yeah, if there was an offensive MVP in that inter-squad scrimmage, I probably would have given it to him. Again, that means less than just about anything. But that view. But he's good. He's a maybe it's because he wears number 25, but he gives me some of the Chris Thompson vibes. He's a guy who's compact enough that he can run between the tackles if he has to, but is really can bounce outside as well, catch passes. It's like last year, for example, when a guy like Michael Wiley, who was an undrafted free agent, was thought to be in the mix to make this roster. Felton looks way better than that. And like last year, they just, when McNichols made the team, it was fine and reasonable. McNichols had a good year, but there was also really not many other options. This time you have other guys. You have, we didn't mention Kaz Allen in this discussion, who's, a true playmaker. He's got to stay healthy, but he's got speed and can move all over the place and play kick returner. Chris Rodriguez, to me, has looked good. He gives you that power. And Felton, a little bit of combination of both of those guys. So, I think they have some interesting players back there. Whoever they end up moving on from, I think could easily latch on with another team. So I wouldn't say that Felton is on the 53, but if they want him to be, I wouldn't say that that's crazy.
Ben Standing, our guest here on the Kevin Sheehan Show, with Dente sitting in for Kevin here on the Team 980. I guess we did talk after the first preseason game, but how do you anticipate the rotation to be with Johnny Newton, who looked really good against New England, Javon Kinlaw, who I think they really, really like, and Daron Payne?
Yeah, I think, Payne and Newton would be my assumption off the bat, and then with Kinlaw coming in off the bench either with Eddie Goldman or just subbing in for one of those other two guys. And Kinlaw happened to be today standing in front of where I was on the sideline for a bit, and man, he is just a huge dude. I mean, I've been around pro athletes for a minute. I used to cover the NBA, so I recognize a different type of big athlete, but he is just a behemoth. Yeah, they definitely have liked what they have seen from him. My take on the defensive line, just in general, is that we still don't know if they have any one guy who's going to be truly dominant or anything. But I feel like they have raised the floor because they've got more depth. I think they could go like 8 deep, but like do it for real, not just because you want to sub guys out. That on both the ends and the tackles, you have a lot of guys like that. So a single injury may not mess them up. I don't know how much they've moved the ceiling, but I think the floor is better. And, we'll see that for real when they start having to stop the run game, because obviously they were terrible against the run last year. They hope these bigger bodies help. And I think there's a reasonable chance to think that it would, but whether that help means they rank 23rd or 15th is a big difference. And that's where, we'll have to see.
How much are the starters going to play on Monday?
Well, I would have said, no more than like a couple of series. And maybe that's like viewing it from the Jaden Daniels standpoint. Perhaps I'm just making this up. Quan Martin plays, could play 3 or 4 series, or, whoever else, Tyler Biadasz, those types of things. But the fact that they canceled the joint practice against the Ravens, they're not going to play in that game, the starters. And, since, they did the joint practice in New England, then they skipped the game, the starters. Then they came back here, they had the inter-squad scrimmage, and then today they played in pads. In order to, as Brian Mitchell tells me all the time, in order to get better at football, you have to play football. So I do wonder, again, maybe Jaden Daniels is a separate conversation, but I do wonder if not having the joint practice puts some starters out on the field for more than just a couple of series, but they won't be out there long. And if the offense scores right off the bat, it may be one and done.
Was the cancellation just a scheduling issue? Because I'm very upset at the scheduling issue leading to the cancellation.
I never understood how this was going to work anyway, because they play the Bengals on the 18th, and then they play the Ravens on the 23rd. To get a joint practice in between seemed very aggressive off the bat. It was such a bummer when they got this Monday night game assigned to them, sort of for this reason. So, I think obviously both teams, as all these teams do, have, some type of injuries they're dealing with in camp. So to have such a quick turnaround, I don't know what the Ravens are dealing with, but to have such a quick turnaround to me seems reasonable to cancel. I don't know if Dan Quinn feels the same, but because, it is football and you're going to have quick turnarounds. They'll have Thursday night games this year, right? Week 2, they're going to have to go from playing on a Sunday to a Thursday. So they'll have to get used to that. But I think it was about that. But I think it's a bummer, the way they've structured their offseason. Clearly that joint practice is going to be a big deal, and now they don't have it.
A couple more for Ben Standig here on the Kevin Sheehan Show with Dent Day sitting in. Are you expecting that Amos is going to be started on the outside come week 1?
I would be surprised if he's not. I mean, not only is he looks good, I don't even know at this moment who would be the other option. I'm assuming Sanders still will be in the slot. Not that Noah Igbenogany has played poorly, but, I think Sanders still is the guy they would like to see there ultimately. Jonathan Jones has been out the last couple of practices. He missed a scrimmage, but, presumably he'll be out there. But I haven't seen any real sense that he would be vying for that. Amos has looked really good, as we have all discussed. And, I would be surprised if he is not the starter opposite Lattimore, barring, whatever might happen here in the last couple of weeks.
Does this Terry thing get resolved? Does he play on an extension?
I got to come up with a better answer than I don't know at this point, because that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, this is obviously going on a lot longer than I thought. And like I've been saying for the last few days, my concern is when does he need to be back on the practice field in order to feel comfortable about him playing in week 1? This is a 18-week season. It isn't just about rushing him back against the Giants. You don't want him to pull a hamstring or what have you if he's been missing time. I'm sure he's in fantastic cardio shape, but you got to run the routes. You got to be precise. You got to take a hit or two. We'll get pushed around, all those things. and he's not doing that. So if he's not out here, look, he's not going to play against the Bengals. I can't imagine he would play against the Ravens, since I don't think any of the starters are likely to play in that game. So now we're just talking about a couple practices. And if he's not back by the time they're done with the Ravens game, that's basically 2 weeks out. From my layman point of view, that seems to me to be the deadline for him being good for week 1. They may just say, hey, if you roll in on a Monday and the game's on Sunday, we'll see you on the field. But in the general sense, I would think 2 weeks out is probably, some kind of a marker.
Yeah, I would be in agreement with that. Ben, we appreciate the time as always. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Back at it again for practice tomorrow.
Ben, always appreciate it, man. Thanks.
That is Ben Standing with us here on the Kevin Sheehan Show with Dente sitting in for Kevin here on the Team 980. I'm going to be back out of practice tomorrow. I'm excited about that. I have not been able to get out there a lot this week at all. This week really just had a bunch of stuff going on there. So I want to see how good the offense looks now that it does really feel like we are in crunch time. And I also anticipate that we are going to get some kind of answer tomorrow as to whether or not, or how frequently or how much the starting offense and the starting defense is going to play on Monday. I don't think we get to talk to Dan Quinn on Sunday. It's the day before the game. Walkthroughs, leave us alone. Not going to get to talk to him before the game on Monday. So tomorrow should be the day where we get the game plan in terms of play time for the starters. And I want to see, I've made it very clear, I want to see the starters play in some capacity that includes like a Laramie Tunsil in there. If you want to leave Bobby Wagner out of it, if you want to leave Von Miller out of it, that I'm okay with. But with Laramie Tunsil and the importance that he is going to bring to this first team offense, I would like to see him get a little bit of reps with Jaden in a legitimate game, or a preseason game, but a game itself with real game speed prior to week 1 against the New York Giants. Week 1, he's going to have his hands full. That Giants defensive line is not to be messed with, not to be played with. We can take all the shots at their offense. I think a majority of those shots would be justified at their offense, but their defensive line is really, really good. They got a bunch of dudes on there. So I want Laramie Tunsil to get out there at least for a little bit on Monday for the 8 p.m. Monday night football game in the preseason. He says as he rolls his eyes at Roger Goodell for scheduling that. Max, I don't know that we've ever done a what do you got this late into the show, but I'm going to quickly, as we wrap things up, ask you for a what do you got? All right, so as many of you know, I'm a college football junkie, and this Michigan punishment is hilarious to me. It was handed down during the show today. We were so busy with a bunch of the football team here that we didn't get to talk a lot about it. Punishing Jim Harbaugh in the year of our Lord 2025, but beginning the punishment in 2028 because he's already being punished for something that happened 3 years ago. If you needed any more proof, evidence, whatever you want to call it, if you needed any more of that to suggest that the NCAA is completely out of its depth, this is that. This punishment is laughable. It is a slap on the wrist more than anything else. I think in most instances, like Sharon Moore is getting punished. I don't know what he really had to do with it. The program is getting punished now, which I guess you can kind of justify, but to what extent are you punishing the kids in 2025 for something that happened when they weren't on the team anymore? It is very much the NCAA saying, hey, don't mess with us, but they don't really have a way to make sure that that is the case. I mean, Harbaugh has a show cause order until like 2000 and at this point, nearly 2040. For what? He's not coming back. There's no other place he was going to coach in college other than Michigan. When he left, he was literally pulling a Pete Carroll the way he did at USC. I am jumping off of the ship and I'm going to another ship. And that ship is in the NFL. When he's done with the Chargers, maybe he gets another NFL opportunity. But he was never going to come back to college. He was not going to keep flip-flopping. I mean, for the love of God, Jim Harbaugh is in like his 60s at this point. You thought he was coming back to college? He's 61. They're punishing that man until he's 73 in college. Like, what is the point of that? You can't take money from him at this point. He's not under your umbrella. It's the most hilarious, goofy, just false bravado kind of punishment that you are going to get. Did Michigan cheat? Yeah, they did. They probably did. But because you're the NCAA and you don't technically recognize that championship, because the NCAA does not recognize the college football playoff, they just don't. They're very weird in football with what championships are recognized and what are not. But they don't officially recognize the college football playoff. That's why ESPN runs it. They don't recognize that, so they can't take a championship away. Maybe you can take like a Big Ten title away, but we still all saw them win a Big Ten title. We still all saw them win a championship. You can argue asterisks until your face falls off in the comments section on our Reddit blog if you hate Michigan. But this kind of punishment, fine the university, sure, but like punishing Sharon Moore, punishing Connor Stallions, who we knew was never going to work in college football again, and punishing Jim Harbaugh is just laughable. Denard Robinson got punished for this as well. He got a 3-year show cause order restricting him from all athletically related activities during the show cause period. Sick. Congratulations. Like, good on the NCAA. You punished somebody that for a crime that we stopped caring about. This was prevalent when they won a championship. Their biggest rival just won a championship last year. College football has changed so significantly since that championship. Nobody cares about this anymore, but good on the NCAA, I guess. All right, that's it for me. Sheehan is back on Monday. He will have a full step-by-step preview, I'm sure, of the Monday night preseason game versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Big thanks to Max and our video producer, Brian, for today's show. Enjoy the weekend. I'm out at practice. Hit me up on Twitter at @TheDentonDay. I'll see you next week, I think. Next Thursday, I think. I'll see you then.